Welcome and thank you for joining today's conference, Market Surveillance Committee meeting. Before we begin, please ensure that you have opened the chat panel by using the associated icon located at the bottom of your screen. There will not be any chat questions for today's call. All audio lines have been muted until the Q&A portion of the call. To indicate you want to ask a question verbally on WebEx, click the raised hand icon at the bottom center of your screen. You will hear a beep tone when you are unmuted. At that time, state your name and question. If you require technical assistance, please send a chat to the event producer. With that, I'll turn the call over to Dr. Ben Hobbs. Please go ahead.
Okay, thanks very much, Stacy. So I'm Ben Hobbs. I chair the Market Surveillance Committee and have the honor of serving on the committee with Jim Bushnell and Scott Harvey, who have joined us today. One of us, you'll have to guess which one, is on the other side of the world and has just gotten out of bed. Also with me, I'm very pleased to have Sylvie Spivak and Guillermo Bautista Alderete. They will be making presentations. Sylvie will be talking about the price formation enhancements, some alternative rules for bidding above the soft offer cap. And then Guillermo will be summarizing a bid cap analysis that he and his staff did of the impacts of alternative rules for setting that cap. In addition, from the ISO, we have Danny Johnson and I believe James Frederick, is that right? Shami Davis and Amelia Blank. Have I missed anybody? I don't believe so. So thank you very much, all of you, for coming. As usual, we will start this meeting with a period of public comment in which, if people have any comments on issues other than what the agenda is on today, we'd welcome comments and questions. And then we will proceed with the ISO presentations and discussion. So, Stacy, can you see if there's anybody on the phone lines who would like to make a comment or ask a question?
We do have one hand raised. We have Michelle. Please go ahead.
At the CPUC, I think it would be really great to talk about two things. The first is the wheeling penalty provisions and how they interact with load during stress system conditions. That's one. And the second thing is, I think I mentioned this previously, but what CAISO's plans are for the summer with regard to the WEEM advisory transfers. So those two things I think are important. Thank you.
Okay, so if somebody, and I'll ask staff to address that, to talk about wheeling penalty provisions and how they their interactions with load, and finally the plans of the ISO for again, Michelle, can you say that again for WEEM? What was it? I'm sorry, I'm typing slowly. It's been a long day.
WEEM transfers, you know, the
Okay.
change in treatment back in July.
Okay, got you. Would anybody from staff like to address these questions?
Well, Michelle, to clarify, did you think that the MSC should talk about these in a session? Was that your thought, or you're just asking the CAISO?
I think Michelle may have dropped off the phone line to wait a response.
She has a note that she's still muted, but I kind of wanted to follow up with her. I mean, these are kind of general topics. Were there specific questions that you think that we can answer, Michelle? Like any real specific questions?
I think she's muted. So, operator, would you unmute Michelle again?
Yes, once you drop your raised hand, it does mute you again. So let me find her and I'll unmute her. Give me one moment, please.
Raise her hand again.
There it is. Perfect.
Oh, sorry about that. So I think the question is, what is the policy with regard to the WEEM advisory transfers in the HASC process? And I think it would be important for the MSC to weigh in on this because it both has reliability and efficiency issues, right? So, and then the circumstances under which one does it. You know, it ended, I think the policy went through November, and maybe it didn't need to go through November and potentially did have some distortionary effects. So that's one part of it. With regard to the wheeling parameters, this I think is really important for reliability to understand those. Recall that, you know, a lot of issues arise as a result of the penalty parameters. I mean, I'm thinking of the transmission penalty parameters from July of 2021, I believe, where the transmission penalty parameters on, there was an outage on Malin, and because it wasn't set right, we ended up scheduling resources that weren't possible to deliver, which has consequences. And I believe that there's a similar problem with the wheeling, and that I think low priority wheels get priority over load, which to me just sets us up for reliability issues this summer. And I've tried hard to get answers to that, and I just can't crack that nut. And I feel like maybe if we have a public discussion about it, maybe we can figure out what it is that those penalty parameters do, and whether that's appropriate for, I would guess, reliability and efficiency, I would suppose. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. We can talk it over with the CAISO and figure out our plan.
Okay, so I don't have anything to say at the moment. I think this is something I have to reflect on and talk with the others. Does anybody want to say anything at this time about WEEM advisory transfers or the wheeling penalty provisions?
I would just ask, Michelle, to the extent you have like really specific questions, please send them our way and we can try to get back to you. I mean, this is a little bit open-ended, and I do worry if we start talking about either of these topics, I'm not sure when we'd stop talking about either of them. And you are right that they are all intertwined, but I don't want to kind of take up the MSC's meeting. So I would defer it back to Ben.
I don't think she's talking about us covering them today. I mean, I think the idea is that we have a future meeting and we talk with you and organize our thoughts and make presentations and talk to Michelle, you know, to clarify your views. So not today.
Okay. Michelle, whether or not you wanted a discussion today, it sounds like you're going to be getting it later on. Thank you for raising the issues. Stacy, is there anybody else on the phone lines?
We do not have anyone else in the queue at the moment.
Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead then. Sylvie Spewak is a senior policy developer with the ISO, and she has a presentation for us.
Ben. Hello, everyone. My name is Sylvie Spewak. I'm a senior policy developer with the California ISO. I'm going to start us off with a presentation on rules for bidding above the soft offer cap. Yesterday, we had a call with stakeholders where we really focused on the feasibility assessment of stakeholder proposals around this issue, because that was a fairly comprehensive discussion around some of the technical details, the system architecture that took some items off the table for us. So today, we're going to skip through all of those proposals that we've taken off the table and really focus on what we can potentially do for summer. So we'll provide a little bit of policy and regulatory background to tee us up and then dive into the discussion. You can go to the next slide. This is the problem statement where it all began. Back in January, price formation working groups on scarcity, I presented a problem statement around use limited resources. So energy storage and hydro resources, their bids and their DEBs are limited to a $1,000 soft offer cap, which we observed may not provide these resources with sufficient flexibility to reflect opportunity costs and conditions when the energy bid cap is raised to $2,000. Go to the next slide. Absent a defined opportunity cost above $1,000, which is something that our systems need in order to verify these costs, these resources cannot successfully verify and reflect those costs in the market. What this means is that we see limited energy resources being dispatched inefficiently early, and that has the potential to put downward pressure on prices, which leading up to a shortage comes with a level of risk. This could lead to an increased reliance on manual actions and or use of operational constraints. These are innately inefficient, and we would like to do better.
Sylvia, I'd like to frame the second bullet. It's not just a matter of putting downward pressure on prices. It's a matter of draining the storage too early in the day so we don't have it when we need it. And, that's what's currently happened. And so far we've gotten lucky and we haven't shed load before because of it. But as we get more and more, storage resources, in California, it's a risk. And the Pacific Northwest, with a dry year, it's a risk for them. And it's, it's not just a matter of increased reliance on manual operations, but it puts more pressure on the operators to manage something they may not be able to manage manually. So it creates reliability risks. So that I see it a little bit differently.
Exactly, and I'm glad you jumped in, because since we started this discussion, we've been hearing a lot from stakeholders on what other implications we might expect from the issue that we started talking about in January. So it's become elevated to an extremely high priority for us, and we have since been discussing what we might do with it. So the first thing we all need to level set on is the implications of FERC Order number 831. So let's go to the next slide. FERC Order number 831 requires bids above $1,000 to be cost verified. This rule requires that each resource's incremental energy offer is capped by the higher of $1,000 per megawatt hour, or that resource's verified cost-based incremental energy offer. So today, resource-specific resources in the ISO, their bids are capped by the higher of $1,000, or that resource's verified cost-based incremental energy offer, which in our markets is represented by a default energy bid. And that default energy bid is also capped at $1,000. Next slide. So we built the cost verification process on top of the process that we use for calculating those default energy bids. This makes logical sense because the DEB is intended to ensure competitive outcomes and conditions where participants might have market power. And it does that by reflecting a resource's marginal costs in the market based on information that they've already given us. The ISO's cost verification process today, which is called the Reference Level Change Request process, builds on this process for calculating DEBs and for requesting DEB adjustments. We want to make sure that scheduling coordinators, market participants have the ability to not just reflect what they think the costs are going to be, but make adjustments accordingly to keep them as accurate as possible. This process fulfills FERC Order number 831's requirements that cost verification works in conjunction with market power mitigation procedures. Next slide. The DEB is intended to ensure competitive outcomes by reflecting a resource's short-run marginal costs. We know that resources have specific marginal costs, and we need to provide sufficient flexibility that they can reflect them in the market. So scheduling coordinators can choose from a variety of DEB options, but there's two in particular that we're going to talk about today that have been developed by the ISO and stakeholders in order to capture the distinct opportunity costs of certain resource types. For example, the storage DEB option defines opportunity costs using a nodal specific LMP from the day-ahead market, in particular the fourth highest day-ahead LMP. The hydro DEB option defines opportunity costs as bilateral buying power in the short, medium, and long term. And I've got a couple of slides so we can have this on the screen a little bit more in depth. I also want to note that scheduling coordinators can negotiate a DEB, something we call an NDEB, through the Department of Market Monitoring. And this is an option if these DEB options or the other three variable cost options or LMP-based options don't provide sufficient flexibility to reflect those resource-specific costs. Next slide. I wanted to have either to review now or just to have as reference throughout the discussion some of the details on what the hydro and the storage DEB options today reflect. The hydro DEB option reflects a gas floor that we add a scalar to. The short-term component represents the opportunity cost of sales at local wholesale electric pricing hubs. And that's got a 140% scalar on it, which is pretty generous. The long-term component represents
just a
the
second,
opportunity
Sylvia, that,
cost.
excuse me, a question. The 140 is applied to actually the strip, the 16-hour strip price, right? Or is it applied to a shaped price?
Don't feel confident answering that question. Guillermo, do you happen to know?
I'll take that. It is
Oh,
applied to
there
the
we
16-hour strip peak price.
Right. So this isn't necessarily very conservative. Second question is, that price is then available for all hours of the day, right? Except it's constrained by the bid cap, but otherwise it isn't just for the peak hours, it's all hours of the day.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Go ahead. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. And then there's a long-term component, and this represents the opportunity cost of sales over future months of the storage horizon. Let's move on to the storage deb option on the next slide. Great. So the storage deb option, we take the max of energy charging duration over round trip efficiency, or zero, plus the variable storage operations cost, and we also account for price-based opportunity costs. And I think the two important things to highlight on here is that the storage deb references day-ahead LMP at the relevant P node that is assigned to the specific storage resource. The deb, which is at the bottom, is intended to cover variability between the CAISO's calculation of the storage deb and the resource's actual marginal costs. So we've got a multiplier on that as well.
Has the CAISO studied the actual accuracy of the fourth highest hour in the day-ahead market relative to the fourth highest hour in real time to assess whether that's a reasonable number? Guillermo perhaps would be the best to answer that, or Amelia.
I have to check the history, Scott. We were doing some analysis at the time we were assessing the options to estimate some opportunity cost. I just don't recall if we historically checking how well that aligned with the real time. For the recent time, we have not assessed that alignment between the day ahead and the real time. Right.
Okay. Because it seems like empirically that, looking at some of these days, it's certainly way off on some of them. And would changing the scalar be something that would be impossible if we looked at the data and saw that it was grossly off? Would that be infeasible for summer 2024?
That would be infeasible for summer 2024, yes.
Okay. We really should build our software better then and have a table. Other ISOs put that kind of number in a table so it can be changed in a day. So something to think about.
So Scott, on your question, I would expect that the fourth highest day ahead would be biased downwards relative to the fourth highest real time, because you're choosing a number from not way out on the tail, but out on the tail. But that's an empirical, as we're right to ask Guillermo, because that is an empirical question. Certainly, there would be a lot of noise and opportunities for gaming, on days where they're even just randomly they're very different. I had a question about the max expression above. So I'm looking at the energy charging duration divided by round trip efficiency. And that's added to a variable operations cost. And I'm not getting the I must misunderstand the units, because the operations cost would be presumably dollars per megawatt hour. But the term in the parentheses, energy charging duration in hours divided by a dimensionless efficiency, will give you something that's in hours. So it looks like we're adding hours to dollars per megawatt hour, and that I think there might be a coefficient or something missing. This is where we Blackboard.
There are all the units. All of the units are missing. I went for a descriptor in words as opposed to numbers here to make it more understandable for our audience. I can pull up.
Well, in this case,
we would need Blackboard.
So let's say the variable storage operations cost, degradation or whatever, is $10. Then the charging duration would be out like 4 hours or something, and the efficiency might be 0.9. So that would turn out to be 4.4 hours for that first term. And I don't know what it means to add hours to the $10 per megawatt hour. So I think I'm actually missing what that's supposed to address. Maybe if that was, go ahead.
It must be multiplied by some kind of opportunity cost concept, I would think. But
I would think so, but it's we're multiple. There's also hours in there. We can, stand at the Blackboard some other time to figure that out. But I'll just, just say at the moment I don't understand that, and we'll look forward to clarifying that sometime in the future.
Yeah, maybe perhaps we can come back to this. We can maybe do an addendum to show the full Deb equation in a couple of examples.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah. Go to the next slide. So as Scott mentioned, there are likely times when maybe the multiplier on the opportunity cost doesn't perfectly capture the variation between what your real and expected costs are. And we know that this is a possibility. So we've built a system in order to accommodate most regular or observed variation between actual and expected costs. This process is called the reference level change request process. It's supposed to allow scheduling coordinators the opportunity to make adjustments to the value that is reflected in their default energy bids. We've got two options. You can use a manual or an automated version of this process. The manual reference level change request process is intended to allow scheduling coordinators to submit their actual or their expected fuel costs directly to the ISO. They send in documentation to the ISO for manual review. The ISO, if those costs are deemed admissible through the system, we recalculate the reference levels or the information that we have stored that informs things like your default energy bid. The scheduling coordinator would receive an adjusted default energy bid, which would be active for the entire day or the entire applicable trade day. The automated reference level change request process allows scheduling coordinators to request an adjusted DEB based on a reasonableness threshold. This is a way that we can automate the process and prevent some of my colleagues from having to wake up early and manually review all of the requested changes. Instead, what we have is a process where the default energy bid requests are compared to another calculation, a number that's stored in our system, and either verified or rejected. This process allows for hourly variation, which means the scheduling coordinator can submit a new DEB adjustment every hour, but the scheduling coordinator does have to verify that change for each applicable hour. Next slide. Both of these processes give scheduling coordinators the ability to request an adjusted DEB. The DEB is a single calculated value, and it's calculated pre-market. And the automated reference level change request process, which is something that we've been discussing with stakeholders, we wanted to clarify, is an automated review and validation of requests, but is not an automation of adjustments. So scheduling coordinators do still have to make the requests themselves. You go into Cyber, you type in a number that you want your DEB to reflect, and it verifies that number and gives you an adjusted DEB in return. We expect that scheduling coordinators retain supporting documentation as they're subject to audit, but these changes can be requested through Cyber at any time, and they are immediately validated or rejected. And in this way, this process is intended to accommodate most deviations between the costs that we have stored in our systems and what might actually materialize throughout the day.
Yeah, can I know we talked about this, I think, when this was developed, but I've forgotten a lot of the logic here, just in terms of, it does strike me as a little odd to have an automated reasonableness threshold that's distinct from an automated or a formulaic DEB process, because they're both kind of formulas that move with external variables and information. And so I'm trying to remember the logic about having an automated, reasonableness threshold that is kind of different than whatever the automated DEB. Because you could say, well, if the threshold's reasonable, why don't we just have the DEB be the threshold? Which sounds like maybe some stakeholders were thinking along those lines and didn't submit their requests for a change to the DEB in the first place. Anyway, so yeah, what was the logic, and what's the main differences between the two formulas?
Yeah, there are a couple of distinctions, and one of them is right in the middle of the screen. The DEB is a single value throughout the day. So the DEB is not dynamic. It doesn't change hourly, correct. The automated reference level change request process gives you the opportunity to have a DEB that changes hourly if you take that action. The other intended benefit of this is to allow for more resource-specific costs. Not all battery storage resources with the battery storage DEB may have the same costs or the same perception of costs or whatever else goes into their estimation of costs. So this process allows for that incremental level of resource specificity.
So this design was really developed for gas, and when intraday gas costs were moving differently from what was expected, and then the people can get stuff off their screen to verify what it's going to cost them for gas and use that for documentation, right? It isn't really developed for use with storage.
Correct. Well, today it does not work for storage and hydro resources.
Right. Okay. So we can this is off the table because it doesn't work.
All right. It's not applicable to the things that we're most concerned about.
It is. Yeah, stakeholders largely support using this process in the long run. The long game here is that this is the process that FERC has recognized as the way to cost verify bids. This is the process that today has the greatest resource-specific functionality compared to the other options on the table. For example, the bid cap that applies to resources today applies to all resource-specific resources. It is not designed to be applied differently or to be applied to specific subsets of resources. This system, however, is. So stakeholders, through their comments and through previous discussions, have really recognized that this has the greatest functionality to deliver what we want at the end of the day, but we don't have the bandwidth this summer to play with it.
Although it does strike me, I guess location, I'm just trying to think through this, that, the issue here is largely opportunity cost, at least, with the storage resources, which at a high level is going to be something that's not unique to individual storage resources. Unless there's some locational aspect to it. And so I don't know what the takeaway from that is, but the fact I don't know if the resource specific elements, except maybe there's an outlier round trip efficiency or something, would be the dominant kind of factor to the issues that we're kind of working through now, in which case a single formula that would apply to all storage resources, I think would capture the bulk of what, we're worried about.
Probably make it a lot simpler than all the resources, as we get 40 or 50 or 68.
Yeah, having to review it for 100 different resources. Yeah. Anyways, that's it.
Go to the next slide. So I think we jumped the gun on this discussion, but we can keep it going. Stakeholders support enhancements to the reference level change request process to facilitate these DEB adjustments for non-gas resources. These proposals are not feasible for summer. We're also open to the idea that maybe, there are things about this process that don't necessarily capture what we needed to. So there's some thinking to be done, and there are some enhancements to be made, but we cannot do them for this summer. Go to the next slide. So as an alternative, we have been thinking about these approaches to make modifications to the bid cap logic, which might allow resources to bid to a value that is above their DEBs and above $1,000. Today, bids above $1,000 are capped by the higher of the $1,000 soft offer cap and the resource's DEB, which is also capped by $1,000. So stakeholders have recommended modifying this logic in real time so that bids above $1,000 would be capped by the higher of $1,000, the DEB, and one of the values or some combination of values in this list, which includes $2,000 when the bid cap is raised to $2,000 per megawatt hour, the higher of the max import bid price, and highest cost verified offer received and calculated in that hour. So this would be an hourly value or a value that differs hourly depending on the max import bid price and what cost verified offers we've received. And this is the same filter that we put on non-resource specific imports that are RA. The other option we've heard from stakeholders is to cap resources or cap storage and hydro resources by the higher of $1,000, the DEB, and the higher of the highest value of the max import bid price that's calculated for real time, and the highest cost verified offer.
But how do we do that at the beginning of the day, that last one? If it's calculated the whole day, but the whole day hasn't happened, I don't understand how we can do this.
The max import bid price for real time is calculated at 9 p.m. the night before the real time market.
Okay, so it's actually a day ahead price. Okay, so we know that. That's good.
There's a separate day ahead max import bid price calculation, but that's calculated before the day ahead market.
Right. Okay.
So this is the most up-to-date max import bid price calculation that we have. But the other portion of this is the highest cost verified offer, and as we just reviewed, you can make hourly requests through the automated reference level change request process, which means there could be cost verified offers throughout the day from gas resources. So this would, in theory, capture those. And we probably need to hear more from stakeholders, but if we're receiving bids above $1,000 because of this logic, those bids would also be recognized by the system as cost verified offers and would inform this logic as well.
Right, but this one would not happen until we got to the hour. So we'd find out at hour 20 that the price is $1,800, but unfortunately we didn't know that at 4 o'clock when we let all the batteries get drained. Right?
Correct.
Right, although that scenario would be only really triggered by a gas price spike that happens between 4 and
exactly what happened on September 6, 2022. We drained them earlier in the day, and then the price went to $2,000 after we drained them.
But that would that be a cost verified offer? I guess is the point that you're right that the actual price trajectory might change, but the highest cost verified offer is as I understand it now is restricted to the gas units.
No imports.
Oh, okay. So they can basically submit some kind of opportunity cost argument in real time to adjust their import.
Well, non-RA
Offers will.
imports, or correct me, Amelia and Sylvia, but they're not subject to cost justification.
So yeah, that's correct. Those do not count as cost verified bids. We use the max import bid price not as a cost verification function, but instead as a screening mechanism for those. The cost verified offer needs to be a specific resource that is cost verified, which today is resource-specific resources that have successfully adjusted their default energy bids through the reference level change requests process.
And right, which I think, so the point I was just trying to make was the second part of the last bullet there, that it's basically restricted to some kind of physical cost example. It sounds like, I think that's what Sylvie just said. And so if there is an import bid that goes up in real time, that doesn't change this index. It might, maybe it should, but as I'm understanding it, wouldn't change the
Right,
debt.
but it does change the opportunity cost. If the
Yes, but
if you
it doesn't change the
displace a
debt.
$1,800 import at hour 20, then we don't want to get dispatched at $250 in hour 12.
Yeah, I understand that. I guess I was just trying to make the point that really those sorts of factors are last updated at, it sounds like 9 p.m. the day before. And so there isn't really a mechanism for adjusting for last minute swings in prices around the West to adjust the opportunity cost concept, at least as it's under the current functionality.
Right.
And I guess you said this, right? So we've had so the MIBP, my memory was it was originally applied only to import RA, or is it applied to all forms of RA? Or all forms of imports, sorry.
It applies to non-resource specific imports that are RA.
Okay. And so what is that, where does that leave non-RA import bids?
They can bid up to 2,000.
2,000, yeah.
When the energy bid cap has been raised to 2,000.
Right. When those conditions are triggered, then they basically just have an automatic 2,000 cap. Okay.
Correct. Are we thinking mulling? Should I go to the next slide?
Oh, no, you can go ahead.
Okay. The other piece of this, of these proposals that stakeholders have been talking about is removing the cap on the DEB, so that bids above $1,000 would be capped by the higher of the $1,000 soft offer cap, plus some additional logic that we talked about on the previous slide, and the uncapped DEB. This modification would apply to all resources in both day ahead and real time. And what this would do is would allow resources to bid up to the max value of their uncapped DEB as it is calculated by the market. And if the uncapped DEB calculation is above $1,000, it would allow a resource to bid above, to successfully submit a bid into the market of above $1,000 up to the value of that uncapped DEB. And recall that the logic for this is bids are capped by the higher of $1,000 and the uncapped DEB. So as long as that DEB value is calculated to be higher of anything else in this logic, you can bid up to it, and nothing will supersede that DEB cap. Next slide. This is a full summary in order of incremental changes from today's policies. We can get an idea of how far we're going, what the potential trade-offs might entail. The top row shows you what we have today. So today there is a $1,000 cap on all default energy bids. Bids above $1,000 are capped by the higher of $1,000 and the default energy bid, which gives all resource-specific resources an effective bid cap of $1,000 unless they are able to cost verify and receive an adjusted DEB. The rest of the proposals on this list are associated with a technology risk, which is listed in the far right column.
Mhm.
We'll go through these briefly. The lowest technology risk that we have assessed in terms of being able to implement something by summer is this top row here, row A. So for option A, where the recommendation is just to remove the $1,000 cap on the DEB so that resources are effectively capped by their uncapped DEB. We can continue to build on that in order to give hydro and battery storage resources some headroom above their uncapped DEB. And that is represented by the rest of the rows on this screen, and we've talked a little bit about that already. So the one other thing I want to mention here is that compared to the DEB adjustments that you might request through the reference level change request process, bidding above your DEB using any of the proposals B through D means that resources are still face the risk of being subject to market power mitigation and having their bids mitigated down to the uncapped DEB. Whereas the reference level change request process would give you an adjusted DEB and ensure that whatever value you have, whatever value you're reflecting in the DEB is maintained in the market. So there's a little bit of an exposure here in bidding above the DEB, and we can talk about what the implications of that are.
Okay, I had one really stupid question here. So
Yeah.
we've got $1,000 as the cap. Is that when 831 conditions are in place and you have some resources capped at $2,000, does this number in this table become $2,000, or this is 1,000 whether 831 is active or not?
Correct. 1,000 always. Resource-specific resources are always
Because
capped
it's supposed to be a soft
by the higher of the,
cap. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. Your soft cap is your cap, not the $2,000 cap.
Right, but if we consider the DEB as sort of the form of cost, then it just seems like the spirit of 831 was if your costs rise above $1,000, you're supposed to be able to bid above $1,000. Yeah, okay. And are alterations to the DEB formula itself considered to be so technologically risky that they're not even on this table, or where would that fall sort of in the spectrum here?
Yeah, modifications to the DEB formula are not on the table for summer.
Okay. That's it for me.
Okay, we do have a hand up from Michelle Tito, so Stacey, could you invite her?
Please
Hey,
go ahead.
Hey, so I do have a question about this, and then I just wanted to have another question sort of comment. So the question about this is, just let's assume that the DEB goes to 1,200 in 1 hour. Does that mean that represents a cost verified bid for every single hour of the day? And secondly, does that then mean we raise the penalty parameters for every single hour of the day to 2,000? And does that also mean that we raise the bid cap for all imports to 2,000? And then I have another question. So if you could answer that one.
Yeah.
And then
Yes. So great question. There is an energy bid cap and penalty parameters. So let's start with the energy bid cap. One of two conditions has to be met to raise the energy bid cap. Either the market accepts a bid above $1,000, cost verified bid from a resource specific resource, or the max import bid price goes over $1,000.
okay, so
One
let me
of those
just
two
stop you
things
there.
happen.
Okay, so on September 6th, the maximum import bid price went above 1,000 for 4 or 5 hours. So if this logic applied, we would have a cost verified, you know, just the fact that the maximum import bid price went above $1,000 means that we have a cost verified bid, which means that the penalty parameters in those hours go to 2,000. But if storage is then able to use this as their DEB, does the penalty parameter go to 2,000 for all hours and all provisions apply for every single hour of September 6th?
Let's back this up a little bit. So the max import bid price itself is not a bid. We would need to receive a bid. Yeah, we need to receive a bid before, in order to count that as a cost verified bid. So if we receive, once we receive a bid above $1,000, that's what triggers the penalty prices.
Okay, I need to go back because that was not my understanding. But in any case, does this mean then a storage resource could bid at 2,000 for the entire day, for all of September 6th?
Right. So when the MIBP drives, when you do receive an import bid above 1,000, does that change the penalty levels for only the hour in which that bid was received, or for all hours of the day? I guess is another way of putting it.
Yeah. I think it's all hours, but if you guys could answer that question, it would be helpful.
Yeah, when the max import bid price goes over $1,000, we allow unspecified imports to go up to the max import bid price above $1,000. We allow everything else that's not a resource-specific resource to go up to $2,000. And then in terms of this logic, that would also trigger these being allowed to bid up to those prices as well.
Right, a DEB is set for the
but you
entire
need,
day, not hourly.
Yeah, right. But
Okay.
a cost verified bid has to come from one of the resource specific resource. Yeah.
But now, no, okay, so, okay, I think I'll go back to this logic. I don't think so. So I think the cap can go up for either a resource specific resource having a cost verified bid, but that is never the case, rarely the case. The case on September 6th was that we had the maximum import bid price $1,000. And then I'd like to say that the maximum import bid price on September 6th went above $1,000 because of 3 bids at Palo Verde, 3 25 megawatt bids at Palo Verde for $1,000. So even though our market, the on-peak price was only the day ahead on-peak price was only $1,000, there were 3 25 megawatt transactions at Palo Verde that we then shaped, right? And so we had price separation, right, between California and Palo Verde. And because of that price separation, we then shaped $1,000, getting a maximum import bid price that was way above $2,000, right? This wasn't an actual transaction. It was just an administratively determined number. And that's what drove this. So I just want to be really careful, but actually I have another point, so I'll come back to this. But my other point is, so first of all, with regard to the Northwest Hydro, why can't, there is no must offer for Northwest Hydro. They can self-schedule their hydro resources. And, the price goes above 1,000, not very often. It was like 7 days in 2021, 7 days in 2022, 2 days in 2023. So yes, on stress system days, you might have to self-schedule. So it feels weird to be making all these changes just because of, because they don't want to self-schedule.
I don't understand, Michelle. The issue is not self-scheduling. It's that they don't want to be drained of their hydro at a low price when they need it.
But they don't have a must offer.
They want to not schedule.
Right.
Well, they have to participate in the EIM.
Yeah, so they have to participate in the EIM, but even HASP isn't binding for them. It's the 15-minute market. They have a lot of time to make their decisions.
I don't understand. They have to offer the supply.
Yeah,
And then it'll get dispatched in RTD, because
well, you only, but in the middle of the day, you only have to cover your RSE. And I presume your RSE is lower in the middle of the day at noon than it is at, 7 p.m. So you can only schedule the amount that you think you need to put in. You don't have to put in more. That's the point. The difference is CAISO has to put in 52,000 megawatts, even though our load is 45,000. But there's no obligation for any other entity to do so.
Yeah, they're only obligated to put collectively in the amount they need to cover their
Own load.
balance requirement.
Yeah.
Meet
Right.
the RSC.
So I don't understand why we would do this for that. So then we've
I
got,
understand, but we'd still dispatch all that stuff. And of course, if they realize we're gonna dispatch at a low price, they're not gonna put it in. And it might actually be good for California to be able to, take the hydro in the middle of the day and not drain our batteries in the middle of the day and have our batteries at night.
yeah, on those 2 days, I think there's going to be a lot of manual actions on both sides. But I do think that there are some risks, like tremendous risks on the cost side for doing this. So if we're just thinking about reliability, for their reliability, then if you were talking about Northwest Hydro being drained and you said you define the problem as a reliability problem, they have the ability to deal with this reliability problem, I think. And likewise, we have new processes with regard to state of charge. If we think this is a reliability issue, to deal with state of charge this summer, new functionality.
I'm sorry, what new functionality are you referring to?
The ability to exceptionally dispatch to hold the state of charge, right?
Oh, yeah, the exceptional dispatch. Well, my view is all of the exceptional dispatch has worked really bad, and the concept the CAISO has articulated, is not good.
No, I agree.
Talk about that. So
but if
I don't think it's a good place to put California in, that we got to have the operators manually, and they can't just ED 1 or 2 units. What we've seen on September 6th is, they start EDing 1 or 2. Then, of course, that means that we drain the other batteries, and they've got to manage all the batteries effectively at once in order to avoid premature draining, and that's what hasn't happened. So it's a very risky strategy for saying that's what we're going to do this summer when we haven't been able to do it before.
Right, but let me just tell you the downsides of doing this. This means that we'll have a $2,000 bid cap all day long. If people all sit at $2,000, how do you distinguish between which resources? It's no longer that you're making cost-effective decisions. Likewise, we have RDRR sitting at 1900. Are we going to dispatch RDRR before we dispatch the storage that we paid for resource adequacy? I mean, there are very many unintended consequences of changing this logic.
Well, I think it's the other way around, Michelle. I think we should not drain the batteries in order to not dispatch the RRDR, which is supposed to be a resource.
Right.
And if we drain the batteries in order to save the RRDR, then if we got nothing left when we get to hour 20, we're in trouble.
Right, and they have the ability to bid $1,000. And what I'm saying is, like, what we're doing is we're opening up the door to this 2,000 bid cap based on faulty logic. And then it's a slippery slope with that logic.
But on September 6th, it was the RRDR that was at 1900 and the batteries were at 1,000. So we were not dispatching our batteries so we could I'm not dispatching our RRDR so we could drain our batteries. I mean, that's what the issue is, or one of the issues. Maybe the RRDR price should be a lot lower, but unfortunately, it goes to 1900.
Right, but yeah, but the reason the price went to, and like this is going back to the sort of the original sin. The reason the price went to was not because we had a cost verified bid at 2,000. It's because we tied it to the maximum import bid price in the first place, based on 3 transactions. Okay, well, we'll go through this.
Danny has his hand up, and thanks, Michelle. And after Danny makes a comment, I wanted to just circle back and make sure I understood that the exchange between Sylvie and Michelle, that I understood the takeaways there.
Yeah.
Please
Jim, yeah, I can't argue Michelle, that there's reliability backstops through the base scheduling process or self-scheduling in the EIM or the ED tools for the CAISO. But the way we're looking at this is those reliability backstops shouldn't prevent us from trying to figure out if there's a better way to do this through accurately representing opportunity costs of these resources and these classes of resources in the market. And so to refocus this conversation, what we're trying to figure out is there a way we can do that and accurately capture those costs?
Okay, so, and then the takeaway, there were a couple things there that my understanding from Sylvie's answers to my questions, or Michelle's, was that when the MIBP does go above 1,000 in some hours, that you have to have an import bid that's actually at or above 1,000 for it to sort of, you know, mean anything in terms of the spillover effects on other aspects of the market. And so they'll use this language, cost verified bid. If you get an import bid at the MIBP that is accepted, is that in the language of all of this considered a cost verified bid?
So Michelle was correct, and this is a little complicated, so let me go through it from the beginning. There's two conditions. One of two conditions needs to be met in order for us to raise the energy bid cap. Either we get a cost verified bid that is a resource specific bid above $1,000.
Okay.
Or the max import bid price goes above $1,000. So the max import bid price could go above $1,000 and we don't have a bid above $1,000, but we would raise the energy bid cap. And when the energy bid cap goes up, a set of penalty price parameters are doubled.
Okay, so the penalty parameters go up whether you get an import price bid at above 1,000 or not. It's just if the index goes above 1,000, then you adjust the penalties automatically.
Correct.
And that's every hour of the day.
Yes.
Yeah, because
that happens hourly in real time. Yeah.
Right.
So today, a cost verified bid is defined by our tariff as a bid that has gotten an adjusted DEB through the reference level change request process. But ISO systems, because that is the only way for a cost verified for a resource specific resource to reflect a bid above $1,000 in the market, ISO systems don't really care that it comes from the reference level change request process or not.
Mm-hmm.
It is assumed that it has to. So as long as we get a resource specific bid above $1,000, it is assumed that that is cost verified, which means if we allow these resources, if we allow the resource specific resources like hydro and batteries to bid above $1,000 using this capping logic, it means that the system will consider those resources to be cost verified, which means they'll set the cap if they're higher than the max import bid price for non-resource specific imports that are RA, as well as the other resources that whose bid cap is now governed by this logic.
Okay, and that cap would be $2,000 though, or would it be the DEB?
Whatever that resource has bid up to, whatever the bid is that they've submitted into the market.
Okay, so if their bid, say their DEB and their bid was $1,400, then basically the cap on the non-resource specific becomes that, not
the higher of that and the max import bid price. Yeah.
Okay. I guess we're ready to move on.
We do have some hands raised in the queue. We have Doug. Please go ahead.
Hi, Doug Boccignone for the Bay Area Municipal Transmission Group. On the maximum import bid price, that's an hourly shaped price, right? It's kind of low in the middle of the day and then high later in the day. And so it by itself isn't going to help us at all to solve the early discharge problem. But so I think it's like we're relying on the cost verified bids in those earlier hours of the day. Am I getting that right, Sylvie?
Well, today we don't see a lot of cost verified bids, so the max import bid price is really the max of what you can go up to.
So
I guess Doug's point was
Which
that
would be saying that, yeah, if under this logic, if you want to bid up above the max import bid price, we would be relying on there being a cost verified bid or a DEB that goes up to something higher than the max import bid price. Yeah.
So I think because of that, this option C or what's shown in row C wouldn't really help us to achieve the primary objective, which is to reserve the storage so it's available for later, discharging later in the day. So then I think that puts you onto that option D, where it's the highest price for the highest priced hour of the day, which I think sort of creates its own problem because it really, if that actually is reflective of truly the highest price that's going to happen in real time, we're not going to discharge. We'll only discharge in 1 hour, not 4 hours, but I guess it's a cap. So if people are nimble, they'll lower their bid prices below that. But I guess what I sort of have a similar concern as Michelle. I think to me, it looks like, you know, I get the desire to have people be able to bid at higher levels to reflect their opportunity costs, but I'm thinking there's so many constraints on how we're going to do this that it may not actually achieve the desired outcome and introduce some unintended consequences related to penalty parameters and other resources that aren't storage resources, you know, being able to bid at higher levels when they don't have this same problem that the storage resources have. So we're like trying to cure a problem that we may not cure and then maybe introduce other problems. And I guess where I'm coming around to is that, you know, we probably should be focusing on this end of hour state of charge parameter, which is, you know, not the exceptional dispatch, but, you know, the real time, the ability of a storage resource to say, I need my state of charge in this interval to be X, which is sort of like a self schedule, but, you know, within the interval, you've got bids up or down within that hour, but by the end of the hour, you've got to have that state of charge. I think that's the only way to really be sure to retain the state of charge for later in the day.
If they do that, you know, then they're not going to be released except at the penalty price.
No, because you say I want my state of charge to be, well, that's true. Like at 2 p.m, they won't be. But you say, okay, you know, at 8, I can go from 100% down to 80%. You know, at 9, I can go down to 60%.
Right. But I mean, it means during the early parts of the day, it's even more restrictive than letting them raise their offer prices because it's basically it's 0-1. They either let themselves be dispatched or they raise their offer price to $2,000 if we're in 831.
True, that's right. But I guess I'm saying that these other ways of raising the cap, I mean, I guess if you raise it for the entire day, this option D, maybe you get there where you're going to have a price high enough that it's you know, not likely to get dispatched earlier in the day unless you really, really need it. But how different is that from what we just described, what you just described?
Well, the thing is that they can choose to offer below that. Whereas with the, you know, the end of hour storage option, basically it goes when it binds, it's binding at $2,000. So maybe they want to offer at 900. We don't let them do that. We mitigate them down to 200. So they then put in something that effectively makes it 1,000 or 2,000.
Right, but I mean, you kind of know, like even in these really extreme days, right? That I mean, if prices are going to $1,000 or $1,500 at 2 PM, they're probably going to be that high or higher at 8.
Right.
So you're taking a risk to, well, especially if you had a day ahead schedule that, you know, you clear day ahead to charge, you know, between 10 and 2 and to discharge between, you know, 7 PM and 10, 11 PM, whatever. You know, the safest thing to do is to put in these in-hour state of charge parameters and just charge when you cleared, because you know it's only the deviations that you're exposed to, right? So just don't have deviations.
So the other issue that I don't fully have my head around was the flexi ramp interaction with the state of charge restrictions. And I got the impression that if you've sold your storage or if you're under a flexi ramp sort of, or if you're flexible RA, that limits the ability to use the state of charge in this way.
That's a good question. I think for Flex RA, well, you certainly can't self-schedule.
And as we've been describing, this is basically kind of another way to self-schedule.
Well, it is, but
Non-schedule,
you
to
still have an
withhold.
economic bid, right? You've got a bid that says if price goes below this level, I'm willing to charge. Above this level, I'm willing to discharge. Within that, you know, subject to, by the end of the hour, you got to get me back. So, I mean, I think that's a fair question. I don't know the answer to it. Is that considered an economic bid or is it considered a self-schedule?
To
Me, it looks like a bid, right? I mean, a self-schedule says.
Oh, I think Alva just posted something in the chat to answer this, but.
It's interesting that that the operators aren't using it. So, there must be something going on that no one wants to use this.
The end-of-hour state of charge tool is a market participant tool, not an operator tool. So it's something that was developed to provide an additional flexibility or an incremental level of flexibility from self-scheduling. That gives you a min and a max constraints that the optimization then tries to respect.
Okay, so then the question is, why aren't they using it if they're not?
On the FlexRA comment, it's something that we asked stakeholders to comment on. So if there are any stakeholders that want to tell us about limitations or interactions with current RA rules.
Alva's saying it's loss of BCR, but if you're worried about losing all these, not being dispatched down and not selling at $2,000, I don't know.
And if you're just, I mean, seems like that's not a big deal if you're just trying to hit your day ahead schedule anyway. Right, you've sort of already accepted, right? You're settled out on the day ahead price, so what are you worried about? I had some concerns about if you had grid charging limitations, and would this parameter override your desire? Like if you don't have enough solar to charge in the middle of the day for the charging portion, could that be a problem? But Sylvie got clarification for us this week that that's not the case unless you're behind an aggregate capability constraint with multiple resources. Then it's a problem. Which I think is, there's many resources that face that risk. So you'd have to manage that during the charging hours. You'd have to find some way to manage that. But I don't think that's the problem we're facing here. It's more like the post-charging hours.
No, I think it's the charging hours we're worried about, where they're the hours that are supposed to be charging, but they turn into discharging hours. I mean, that's what happened on, September 6th. The prices rose at, 1:45, 2 in the afternoon, and people started getting drained.
I see what you're saying. That's a good point. I guess it's a problem if you're worried about not if the solar production isn't strong, you know, significantly above your charging.
Or
Or
something else goes on that, you know, causes us to, you know, maybe there were a lot of things going on September 6th. Maybe it was outages and imports that didn't come in, and all of a sudden they're getting depleted. And maybe there was nothing else we could have done, but you see it happening.
I think it's worth exploring implementing for individual scheduling coordinators to figure out whether they can make the end of hour state of charge parameter work for them.
As I'm
Good to get some
understanding it, though,
feedback, yep.
this doesn't require this functionality is already there, right?
Exactly.
And so it's just a
Well,
matter
it's there in the market. I think there's very few people who have actually implemented it.
Right, but that raises some questions about whether people just haven't caught up with it, or whether there's something that, you know, that it doesn't solve the problem that they're focused on. I think there's also an incentive issue, in the sense of if we are sort of capping everything at 1,000, and kind of the uncapped true price would be 1,000 at 2 p.m. and 1,500 at 8 p.m. Then you don't really have an incentive to not drain unless you're going to be charged back up again. So
no, I think you have a big incentive, because especially if you cleared in the day ahead.
Yeah, no. If you had a day ahead schedule you needed to match, then that's the one category where you would want to. I could see. It seems like you should be able to use end of hour state of charge to try to match that. But if you didn't have a day ahead schedule, you know, it's not clear why you wouldn't want to just sell at the first opportunity of the max price.
So it's not necessarily
but that's still an
price.
opportunity cost, right? If
Right.
you can't set the price, but the price may go up above that, so you want to get paid that.
Yeah, on September 6th, you know, the price in PG&E, you know, was still under $1,000 till 2:30, and in SCE till 3 o'clock. But the batteries were getting dispatched way up at those lower prices, and then later the CAISO used exceptional dispatch and so forth to stop dispatching all those resources between, you know, like 4 and 5:30, when the price was $2,000. So they sold it way under 1,000, and then if they had a day-ahead March schedule, they were buying it back at $2,000. So it was and I think there were some presentations about this by CISA at the regional forum.
And that's part of my concern, is if we're sort of indexing this to the maximum import bids prices, unless people are actively bidding lower than that, you know, let's say everyone's just bidding at the same price, both the imports and the internal resources. I think the internal resources will actually clear first.
Well, especially if they're getting mitigated down.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, but even if they're
exactly
not,
how much, but Guillermo's report said that on September 6th and 5 or 7 or whatever, that some of these batteries were getting mitigated down. So, you know, they can't just bid even to 1,000.
but even if they're not getting mitigated, if they just happen to have the same bids as the imports, they're going to clear before the imports, just because they're more effective. You know,
hey everybody, we've got quite a few other people in queue here. Doug, if you don't mind, I'm going to go on to some of the others who've been waiting a while to comment. It sounds like we could continue for a while. So Stacy, I'd like to go to Chris Devon, who's the next in queue, I believe.
Please go ahead.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, MSC members. This is Chris Devon with Paragen. We operate over 1,500 megawatts of the existing storage fleet in California. I did want to make some comments today. I was pretty quiet yesterday. I didn't chime in. I just wanted to listen in to the different arguments. And, you know, I just thought I would mention in reaction to some of these concerns that have been raised. You know, there's a lot of folks that tend to lean into concerns that unintended consequences that then paralyzes us from doing things. And so I would caution us against that, caution the CAISO against worrying too much that these things will have such bad unintended consequences, because we are facing the ramifications of what we know are the actual consequences of not being able to bid over 1,000. Scott Harvey did a really nice job of pointing that out, that when we have this happen to us, we have our resources with day ahead schedules, which we always get scheduled because we are all RA resources. So they're all going to have those day ahead schedules. Then we get forced to discharge early because we've been capped at $1,000. So as soon as the prices start to get above 1,000, you see all the storage starting to be dispatched. Then we end up having to buy back at $2,000 because we have no longer any state of charge left to deliver that physical energy. So this is a huge problem for us storage owners. And we think that this really deserves some kind of interim solution. So I just wanted to really strongly support CAISO doing something for this summer, because if we don't do anything and we kind of just acquiesce to concerns here about unintended consequences, we're going to end up assuring ourselves that we have the same outcome yet again, and then face the financial consequences of that. And these resources can only absorb so much of that. I mean, yes, we have RA contracts, right, where we have PPAs supporting them, but a lot of revenues that comes from these are merchant that end up, supporting the overall financing of these projects. And if we don't, we consistently cannot have economic outcomes from the market, then that's going to start to impact the ability for people to develop these kind of resources. And these are the resources we need in California to meet our policy and reliability goals. So I just wanted to mention all that, and thank you to MSC for taking this up, provide that counterbalance point here. And then also just on the end of our state of charge tool, we do not like to use that tool. It doesn't work for us because it exposes you to essentially self-scheduling outcomes, or the multi-interval optimization sees advisory pricing intervals, and then it ultimately may move your resource and then see that it needs to then charge you uneconomically. And to Elva's point, I believe the rules are that you're no longer eligible for BCR at that point once you've been using that. So for us, it's almost like self-scheduling, and I've heard Doug Boccignoni and others mention that we should just allow these resources to self-schedule, and that could solve some of this, but that does not solve our concerns, because ultimately then we are just exposed to the outcomes that are potentially still uneconomic for us if we can't bid above 1,000 in some of those periods. So I think with that, I'll conclude my remarks, unless you guys have any questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. I think we can go on to Alva as the next person in queue.
Please go ahead.
I wanted, so I don't know, whether the end of hour state of charge. First of all, it's a range, and it's complicated to handle. I'm actually, after all this discussion and after Sylvie's, we've learned something from Sylvie's presentations every day, and I think one of the significant interactions between what she said and what Michelle had brought up is that, irrespective of when this comes into play in the day, there's a real possibility that a large number of resources will have bid at levels to enable their bids to essentially be brought down to the maximum level that's allowed in the market. That's basically the way this is likely to work in practice, because that's the easiest way to, since you don't actually know in advance what's going to necessarily happen in the hourhead market. You're going to essentially put in a bid that the CAISO will bring down to a level that is accepted in the market. That's what happens with the resource adequacy imports. And what it appeared was coming out of Michelle's discussion with Sylvie is that essentially you could have many, many resources that are being set to that level for all the hours where storage is being permitted to bid at that level, which in my mind subverts the original argument that Don Trethewey made for this, which made sense to me, which was that you want storage to be in the right place in the bid stack. in each hour, essentially. If it's meant to be more expensive than thermal, and that's the point of their bids, then they should be able to position their bids in such a way that that happens. I'm not confident at this point that as the solution is currently proposed, that it will have that effect. I think the effect could, in fact, be what Michelle was suggesting could happen, in which the data analysis yesterday showed was happening, which is that large numbers of resources come in at the cap and the supply curve gets shifted to one in which the largest part of the bid curve is at the cap, and potentially at a level significantly above 1,000 for multiple hours. And I'm not sure that's it doesn't address the original intent of this initiative. So I'd like to see that concern addressed before this solution is moved to. I'm just saying this is what I've learned from listening to this conversation.
Alva, when you say this solution, are we talking about
basically option C here?
Okay.
I'm not sure about option A. The effects even of option A sound like it potentially could be somewhat similar, but I don't think it's it necessarily allows kind of the swamping of the market. I don't know, but I'm quite struck by the idea that these bids, by being accepted in cyber, suddenly allow potentially a bunch of placeholder bids to all go to the same level and distort the entire supply curve in the real-time market. If that's actually what is happening, that's a troubling side effect of making this kind of change.
To add a little clarity to that, something that we discussed with stakeholders is that we heard from the storage stakeholders that the goal was to be placed at the top of the supply stack. But what all of these solutions do is put these resource-specific storage resources on the level playing field, but not above where the non-resource specific RA imports are. They don't get them. Yeah.
Doesn't this also open the door, though, to a lot of other bids suddenly being accepted at that level as well, or am I mistaken? That was what I was.
Yeah, it would raise the cap. Yeah.
So I think that's a troubling side effect of this. The intent is to say, well, we want these resources to be able to bid more accurately with respect to everything else. But since there's no real way to do that at this point, I'm concerned about this solution too. I'm really echoing some of Doug's concerns about this.
If we want at some point to take a brief foray into the analysis, we've got some bid duration curves which show you where some of these resources are in the supply stack on high price days. And we have some data that shows the max import bid price curve, which might help illuminate what Chris and others have been trying to describe.
Is this in Katie and Guillermo's presentation, Sylvie?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we will get that. We'll get to that later this afternoon. And that's a good connection that you've made. Okay, Alva, thanks. I'd like to go to Nicole Selling from DMM.
Please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome, thanks. My name is Nicole Selling, and I'm with the Department of Market Monitoring. DMM would just like to take this opportunity to provide our thoughts on this initiative. So DMM agrees conceptually that resources with intraday opportunity costs should be able to reflect these costs in their bids and reference levels. The intraday opportunity cost should reflect the opportunity cost of these daily limited resources, such as storage and some hydro resources, from being dispatched too early and thus not able to dispatch during the highest priced hours. Therefore, on days where the $2,000 bid cap is in effect, intraday opportunity costs would typically exceed $1,000 in the hours prior to the highest price hours, not during the highest price hours themselves. So for this initiative, DMM recommends an approach that allows bids and/or reference levels of these resources with daily limitations to exceed $1,000 in a subset of hours other than those where the $2,000 hard bid cap is in effect, but not for all hours of the day. We believe this approach would balance the efficiency and reliability benefits of avoiding early dispatch with the risk of allowing resources to bid over $1,000 all day to accommodate only a select few hours where the intraday opportunity costs exceed $1,000. DMM had recommended the ISO change the reasonableness threshold for reference level change requests for storage and hydro resources at an hourly granularity, but the ISO found that changing reference level values would be infeasible in the short run. DMM would consider alternatives such as removing the $1,000 cap from DEBs and an interim increased bid cap for daily limited resources on days where the $2,000 hard bid cap is in effect. We'd like to again reiterate that the higher bid cap should be limited to the window of hours where the intraday opportunity costs exceed $1,000, which will generally be the hours preceding those with the highest priced hours. Only increasing the bid cap for resources during a limited number of hours mitigates some of the risks with raising the bid cap all day long, such as higher bid prices when they're not needed and higher bid prices during the peak hours when market power concerns are highest and the intraday opportunity costs are the lowest. Thanks.
Yeah, so I was wondering why it would be desirable or would be considered to raise the cap in the hours after the high-priced hours. And perhaps I'm missing something, but that sounded reasonable to me, Nicole.
Yeah, I had the same thought. And even, if we had more time to do it, to limit it to the hours which they don't have a day-ahead market schedule. But I think, if we could do it for, at least carve out, they can't raise the prices in the net load peak hours, that would be a good, Sylvie, can you say anything about whether that kind of restriction would be feasible for August 1?
We did think about it. We thought about having this be something that activates for the number of hours that stored resources have stored in the master file to tell us what their cycle is, how many hours they cycle for. But we don't have that sort of integration in order to code the logic into the bid cap. We also don't have anything conditional attached to the bid cap right now, so that adds another layer of complexity.
Okay.
Which makes it infeasible for summer, is the punchline.
Okay. Thanks, Sylvie. Thanks, Nicole. I think Don, are you still waiting in queue? Yeah. Don Trethway. Good to have you back.
Scott, Jim, good to see you guys. Hey, so I think Jim hit on one of the key points on this whole thing is what we're doing today is so far from consistent with FERC Order 831. It's mind-boggling that we are not reflecting these opportunity costs, intraday opportunity costs in the DEBs. And so, that needs to be fixed. CAISO can't fix it for summer because of the way that they implemented 831 and tightly coupling all of these DEBs and different systems. Then, we need to find something interim. I think we're pretty close to what the Department of Market Monitoring was asking for. We had proposed something similar to C, where we would basically have a bid cap at the higher of the MIP or the cost verified bid. We assumed that you would always have both of those so that you could get an hourly shaped bid, not that you would have, for instance, just the maximum import bid price and never have a cost verified bid also above. So we assumed both of those would always be in effect for all hours. And so you would just simply take the higher of the two, with the highest cost verified bid being what's really used for ensuring you're at the top of that bid stack and you're not going to be discharged earlier in the day. You do need to consider having the maximum import bid price also, to the extent that period where the prices are set by the maximum import bid price extend beyond the duration of storage. So if that was in place for like 8 hours, then you would want to have the ability for storage to potentially bid up at that level. So it's simply to cover, and to the extent that it's less than the 4-hour window, for a typical lithium-ion battery, you would expect people to want to sell in that period And most likely, since they're all RA resources, it's going to be when their day ahead schedules are. So no one's going to want to buy back their day ahead schedule at $2,000. And so since we can't make these changes to the devs, and all we can do is the cap adjustments, I think it's that this concern that everyone's going to bid at the cap, I think is a little concerning, because only those that bid above the cap are reduced to the cap. If some storage resources bid below the cap, then those are going to go in at a price below the cap. So that's what can actually allow some differentiation from the bids. And as we've all said, we would not extend this logic to all resources this summer. It was only to those that have demonstrated intraday opportunity costs that are currently inappropriately not reflected in their default energy bids. And so you have a very narrow solution trying to get something in very soon. And it's very disheartening that we brought this issue up to CAISO the end of last year, and we're now to the point where we've wasted time that now we basically have not only can't meet the June timeframe, we're going to put something in August, which I find highly skeptical that the CAISO, even if they commit to it today, will actually do it, given that August is not a good time to do software changes. So I think we need to, again, focus on what we're trying to do for summer, which is to find what is going to be imperfect, because the perfect way is to actually have these opportunity costs correctly reflected in their devs, and use the same logic you use for a gas resource in terms of who gets and what they're allowed to bid to in a given hour. But we can't do that. And the simplest thing we can do is the bid for this summer. And like I said, I think there's going to be enough differentiation, because you don't automatically bid. Some resources are going to bid lower than the cap, that hopefully it's not going to be as big of this concern that Alva raised. Thanks.
Been wondering this, and I guess we'll see the presentation later on this, but yeah, it doesn't strike me as necessarily an equilibrium that everybody would be bidding above the cap in expectation of having the bid brought down to a single level. Just logically, as the cap gets higher and higher, some resources are going to want to not be stuck at it.
And I would note today, all the storage is bidding at 1,000.
Yeah. So anyways, I've just been trying, I don't know if that's an equilibrium, and it's certainly going to depend upon the level of the cap.
Agreed.
Not to say that, I don't know, it's something to think through.
Don, thank you. So Sylvia, I think you have a couple slides to go. And
yeah, they're mostly summary slides. We don't need to dwell, but we go to the next slide. These are just two high-level points that we wanted stakeholders to consider. The first is that if we don't consider removing the cap on the DEB, these proposals don't modify the DEB calculations, which means it's subject to market power mitigation. Resource bids would be mitigated down to the DEB as are currently defined by the tariff and by policy. And the risks that we've all been talking about would not be resolved. Removing the cap on all the DEBs as a foundational step would allow non-gas resources to bid above $1,000, which we've already discussed. This wouldn't necessarily change the ultimate outcome for gas resources, who today can bid above $1,000 because they can use the reference level change request process. So it just eliminates a step for them, but doesn't give any additional flexibility in terms of what they can reflect in the market. I also wanted to note that this is a step that doesn't necessarily need to be unwound as opposed to some of the bid capping logic we've been discussing. If we remove the cap and all the debs, the reference level change request process would continue to be what it was intended to be for. So this could be done and then we'd move on. We go to the next slide. So these are the three proposals in more or less final form with a bit of a summary on pros and cons. Step 1 would be to remove the DEB, and then either step 2 or 3 would be an incremental bid cap modification on top of that to provide some level of headroom for storage and hydro resources. 2 is the one that we heard from stakeholders, and we've already heard discussion today around the potential merits or downsides of using the max import bid price. The option number 3 is the highest day-ahead marginal energy cost. We offered this to stakeholders to consider as an alternative to the max import bid price because it's based on a more liquid market result that has hourly granularity. Ideally, we would want this to be something more specific. If we're looking at stored resources whose opportunity costs are nodal specific, we might want the price in the bid cap to also be nodal specific, but it's not in the cards in terms of our implementation bandwidth. And that's all I've got. I'm happy to turn it over to Guillermo if we want to dive into the 831 bid cap analysis.
Sylvia, I see that there is a hand raised by Dan. Do we want to take that before going to the analysis part?
You're muted.
Yeah, I just check with Jim and Scott. You want to say anything before I take Dan's?
Let's take Dan.
Okay. Stacy, can you invite Dan?
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
Thank you. That was a good invitation there. Appreciate the formality. So Dan Williams for the Energy Authority. Just for the MSC members, I know I've spoke with you in the past, but the Energy Authority is a national nonprofit company that partners with public power entities in the CAISO's market and in the Pacific Northwest, in EIM and bilateral markets, and in organized energy markets in the East for load and generation purposes, management purposes. But I just wanted to reflect and support Don Trethewey's comments that were made. Really agree with everything that he said, but I wanted to just bring in the perspective and reminder that this policy is also very important for EIM entities outside the CAISO. So when we're talking about things like day-ahead positions being managed, when we're talking about the impact to California load interest, those sorts of things, those all definitely matter. And I agree with a lot of the conversation that's been here today, but just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of the reliability impacts that the bid constraints can cause specifically for Pacific Northwest hydro interests, a few of which weighed in with some comments during the last period and would encourage those being reviewed, but really just wanted to state that this expands broader than the storage community within the California ISO. And as we're looking at some of the analysis coming up, we need to think about the context also of the way that the bilateral markets and the way that EIM participants come into EIM influences their options and their needs to be able to use flexible bids to manage their limited fuel resources, especially during tight conditions, which, given the water year that the Pacific Northwest is experiencing, are very likely to accrue as we get into the summer and into the later part of the summer. So that believe that's all for now. I think maybe as we get into the analysis, may have another comment on just sort of the marking of the the price levels and where the bids are coming in at relative to imports in the analysis.
Okay, thank you, Dan, for that comment. I noticed that there are a lot of comments in the chat, and I would really rather, if you think it's important enough to put in the chat, it's probably important enough to get in queue. I'd really appreciate if you could contribute the conversation rather than having several things going on in parallel, which may be hard for us to react systematically to. So I see Don Trothway is in queue. Don, Stacy, you can open up Don's line.
Yeah, Ben, can we go back one slide? So this is a question for Sylvie. Isn't number 2 actually incorrect in terms of the proposal? It's really the higher of the maximum import bid price or the highest accepted bid, not just the maximum import bid price. You know, that again, the whole intent that everyone was communicating was how do you replicate as closely as possible the way that a non-resource specific RA import bid cap is calculated.
Thanks for the clarification, Sylvie.
Yeah, we've just put out a stakeholder comment template, and we're asking for feedback on that exact question. So if we include the exact same logic as we do for RA imports, you still have to think about, we've asked stakeholders to provide clarity on whether or not we expect these bids from resource-specific resources to count as that cost-verified value, and what the implications are of including the same logic on resource-specific resources as the non-specified resource RA imports. So that's an open question, and we welcome clarity from stakeholders on what the intent is.
I don't think anyone had the intent that you would ever just use the maximum import bid price. For the reasons we discussed, that it doesn't address things earlier in the day. And again, the key reason why we had it in our proposal was simply to mimic what was done for the resource specific, non-resource specific RA imports, and basically use the same cost verification logic as you use for those resources as you use for these other resources that have, where it's difficult to ascertain precisely what the intraday opportunity cost should be in their cost verified bid.
I thought the highest value was going to be used over all the day, right? So is that?
I think that was one. Yeah, Scott, that was one proposal, but to address some concerns raised by, for instance, Michelle and Doug, that would be everybody bidding up to 2,000 every single hour of every single day. We thought that it, you know, as a compromise to get something in quickly summer versus having some philosophical debate on what the DEB should be, that if you use this hourly value where you could have lower values earlier in the day, that would help to address their concerns that people would be bidding at 2,000 every single day.
But I don't understand the point of having lower prices early in the day. It just means you'll use batteries earlier in the day. I mean, the whole point is to have higher prices earlier in the day. Right,
but if the resources were bidding at the same value as the resource specific non-RA resources, that's the highest that someone would be allowed to bid, except for a export or a non-resource or just a regular old import. So again, I'm with you. You could argue $2,000 is the right price or the highest price for the entire day. But again, just trying to mitigate some of their concerns to get something in quicker rather than basically what we're doing now, having lengthy debates about what the exact opportunity cost calculation would be when it's sort of speculative whether the $2,000 price is going to materialize or not. So
raising the price only when we get into the on-peak hours doesn't seem to do anything except raise the price. It doesn't address any of the issues about draining the batteries. I just don't understand that.
No, but the batteries would now not all resources will have the ability to be at that level. You're going to have the non-RA resource specific resource, the RA ones, and the resources that have an intraday opportunity cost, which is a subset of the hydro and storage.
Right.
That's going to be at the top, relative
It's
to
not
any
gonna
other
be at the
internal
top
resource.
unless they can put it at the top earlier in the day. I just don't
Yeah,
get
no,
it.
they should, no, that's exactly right, Scott. That's why I made my point. It has to be the maximum import bid price or the highest specified, highest accepted, because that value is flat over the entire day. So you, if you look at, when Guillermo looks at his, when Guillermo shows his charts, you should just look at what is the highest accepted bid, then you follow the maximum import bid price, and that's what you would set the bid cap at for these resources. And so you can see that it's right above what everybody needs to be. So, I mean, I'll hold my comments there, but if you look at Guillermo's, the charts that I think Guillermo's going to walk through.
Okay, let's wait then, Don. I'm not following you, so let's wait and look at Guillermo's slides and then we
Well,
can
I
talk
think
about
this
it.
this may be related. I just had a question. So number 2 is relates back to I forget your letters there, but this is not taking the highest single hour and applying that all hours of the day. Is that it's kind of not clear from the wording here what's intended.
This is phrased as the highest single value of the max import bid price that's calculated for real time. And it's phrased like that on this slide because what we heard from stakeholders is the point that you've just discussed, which is you need to be placed higher during those hours or we're actually seeing the max import bid price be below where they need to be. So that solves that problem. And we didn't include the highest cost verified bid logic here because we wanted stakeholder feedback on whether or not that was intentional. If we move forward with this proposal, what we'd see is non-resource specific RA resources being able to bid up to also the highest cost verified bid. So it just continues to stack on top of each other, and we needed more stakeholder feedback before finalizing.
But I guess I was a little confused by, so if this is the highest single hour of the shaped MIBP that we're talking about in option 2, then is it likely that there would be a cost verified bid that would be above that level?
Don is correct. We can see this in the analysis, and what we see is that hydro resources do get that high. We rarely see storage resources get that high, but a hydro DEB uncapped can be higher than the max import bid price.
Okay.
However, they would need to submit the bid to the market. So it's not just if the DEB gets up there, but if the hydro resource whose uncapped DEB value is above the max import bid price submits a bid to the market of that value, then that would set the cap.
Okay. I was thinking gas plants. So, okay, that makes more sense. And I thought Don's comment was more that during particularly off-peak hours, this cost verified bid would be higher than the shaped MIBP, but if you're taking the max of the shape doesn't matter. So it's more about the hydro DEB versus the MIBP. Sounds like.
And today we rarely see cost verified bids to the reference level change request process get higher than the max import bid price. We rarely see them at all, just generally. So the max import bid price is what sets the ceiling here.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's in part because you're capping depths.
Sorry, you echoed a little bit. What was that?
Now we have echoes here.
No.
Not sure whose this is. So just you said you almost never see a cost verified bid above the MIBP, but then I sort of added, is that maybe is in part because you're capping the DEBs at $1,000. And if you didn't do that, then it might become more likely that a cost verified bid might be above the MIBP. Because as you said, the DEBs do rise above that. But in those circumstances, they're probably above 1,000.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
We have Callie waiting on the lines. Callie Wells.
Yeah, hi. Hi, it's Callie Wells with WTTF. I just wanted to make a quick comment that something that hasn't been brought up yet, but we've been asking for is I think PDR needs to be included in this. It is limited to 1,000.
Kelly?
Oh, am I having audio issues?
You are echoing.
Yes.
Is this, hold on one second.
Better now.
Is this better? Can you guys
Yes.
hear me better?
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. I was just going to make a quick comment that we're talking about all these resources that have the intraday opportunity cost, and PDR too is limited in this way. And they also saw issues, dispatch issues, I think back in summer of 2021. So this is something that we also think should be on the table for summer of 2024 to address. So I just kind of wanted to get your guys' reaction to that. Obviously, they don't have DEBs, so I think it's actually a pretty it's an easy implementation and just identifying the hours that they can bid above 1,000.
Why are they energy limited? Why can't they just bid at 1,000?
Well, so they do today, but when the bid cap goes up to 2,000, they're in the same camp as storage and hydro today. They are capped at 1,000 no matter what. So you
Right,
get,
but
they
isn't that
also
right?
have,
So that we don't drain the storage in order to avoid using the demand response? Shouldn't we use the demand response first and not drain the storage?
they had the same issue as storage did a couple summers ago where they were prematurely utilized by the market and then not available when they were actually needed in the peak hours because they are energy limited.
In what way are they energy limited? Because I'm not sure why they would be.
A lot of times they have programmatic limitations, so where they're only able to be dispatched for like 3 or 4 hours a day.
If they have behind the meter batteries, that would be one way. But
yeah, that too. But we just wanted to throw that out there. I think it's, they have the exact same issues that storage experienced back in summer 2021. And so it's just something that we felt should be also included in this effort.
I'll note that during the discussion yesterday, we did say that PDR would not be on the table for summer. We're happy to continue the discussion around that, but as Callie just noted, PDR resources do not have DEBs. And when the CAISO submitted their compliance filing to FERC on FERC order number 831, it was represented that PDR does not have a DEB and therefore would not be able to bid above $1,000. So while it may seem like an easy technical fix or easy technical modification, we can't actually apply that until the resources have a DEB. So we would need to sit down with the stakeholder community and come up with what a DEB looks like for PDR first.
Yeah, I think though that you have current justification that you guys use for non-resource specific non-resource specific RA imports. Those don't have DEBs either, and they are allowed to bid above 1,000. So it was just simply taking that same justification, applying it to PDR. I don't want to take up more time. I know Guillermo has a lot of data analysis, but just wanted to throw that out there that PDR is in the same boat.
PDR is a resource-specific resource.
Do what?
PDR is a resource-specific resource, though. So we have PDR is in the resource-specific resource bucket, and then the non-resource-specific RA resources have a different rule because they are non-resource-specific resources. And FERC treats those two groups of resources differently.
Yeah, I didn't want to have a theoretical debate about this right now, but I just wanted to get the MSC's, thoughts on that and just kind of throw it out there because I do think that they need to have some rules put into place that allow them to be, correctly situated in the bid stack under these conditions. But that was all I had. Thanks.
Okay. I don't have a sense of what fraction of PDRs have significant energy limits during the day, and if many of them do, then I can see the relevance of these arguments, but this discussion. But there's probably enough on the plate for the summer that can be deferred, unless we see obvious inefficiencies there too, which I think is what you're arguing in favor, Callie. I would like to get on, since we're 2/3 of the way through the 3-hour session, I would like to get on to Guillermo's presentation. So Sylvie, thank you very much for the material and the discussion, and thanks to all the stakeholders for participating, and looking forward to the analysis, which I understand was undertaken by Katie Wickler and Guillermo, but she's not available today, so Guillermo will be presenting it on her behalf.
Thank you, Ben. I will chime in as much as I can. And thank you for the previous discussion about this. And this second part of the presentation, even though there are many slides, the material is quite compacted because it's repeated material for different days. There are like 3 different sets of metrics that we want to discuss in this session. And before that, let me start with some background and set some context to the analysis that we are presenting. First, this is historical analysis for historical periods of times when we basically trigger the conditions of 831. It's very surgical to these instances, to very specific set of days. The second piece is that this is reflecting the market solutions, the depth that we have at that time, and that is predicated on the existing rules that we have so far. There is no way we can come with a counterfactual if we were to change any of the rules of the cap that we have, how these solutions would look like. And the third one, obviously, is that this doesn't consider the potential change of behavior in the bidding, right? Once we change the rules, the bidding is going to be slightly different, and therefore the consequences of the pricing outcomes that we could see could potentially be different to what we see just under the current bidding structure. And the last one, this is historical, and as we always said, the historical analysis is a good reference to see how things have performed, but it's not a guarantee that this is going to materialize in the future, even when we make some changes to the structure of the bidding. With that, let me go straight into the material. And let me start with the first part. Next slide, please. The comparison that we have is pretty simple. First, we are just subsetting for the instances in which we have the conditions that the bid ceiling was raised to 2,000, effectively the days where we have the 831 trigger. There are some common data points. We have, in general, the IFM prices, SMEC, the system marginal energy component. We have the RTPD or FMM or 15-minute price comparison. We have another reference that is what we call the historical on-cap depth. That means through the calculation that we do for the depth, at the end we impose this hard cap of 1,000. So the values that we may show are the natural calculated values if we were not to cap those to the $1,000, how high they naturally can go. And something to highlight, this is specific to the hydro depth calculation. This doesn't include the negotiated hydro depth that may also be a component to the whole picture. And there is also a set of illustrations to highlight the dynamics of the bid stack. We pick out ending 19 in general just to reflect a picking out condition. As you see through the day, that bid stack may change, and in particular for the storage resources when we're in the middle of the day. Just keep in mind that reference that is specific to our ending 19, reflecting the picking conditions. Next slide, please. Here is one day, and this is the day that we have been discussing since it happened. That is the critical day of September 6, 2022. This is the day, as you may recall, as we have reported in different forums and analysis, where we saw this interesting dynamic that we have prices rising very quickly early in the day to the point where storage resources started to be prematurely depleted. This is the day where we also have relatively high prices for the peak. And what you have here is a simple comparison through the hourly profile across different metrics. One, we have the 15-minute average hourly prices for the real-time market, the SMEC, and that is the trend in red. Then we have the trend in yellow, that is the effective maximum import bid price calculated for the real time. That is the yellow line, and you can see that at some point in the peak time, out ending 18 or so, it hits effectively the $2,000 price. We also have two other references as part of this assessment of possibilities for changes to the summer. One of them is just taking the highest integrated forward market price, the SMEC, and applying this adder of 10%. So it's highest value of the SMEC in IFM times 1 and 10%. And that is the one in blue. And that would be a flat value because we are just taking the highest value as a reference. And then the last one is the highest on-cap default energy bid. This is the calculated hydro depth. We just take the highest value on that through the natural calculation. And we have all these calculations that Sylvia explained earlier of the three components. We come with the final value, and then we cap it if that value is exceeding the cap of $1,000. The value that you may see here is the natural calculated on-cap value. And if you put these four pieces in context, you can see for this critical day how they would play, how the real-time prices play, and how that was relative to the maximum import bid price calculated for the real time, and how either the 110% highest IFM price or the on-cap default energy bid would be relative to these levels. In general, you can see that either the highest IFM at 110% or the on-cap DEB would come slightly lower than the maximum price that we observe through the peak hours. In some cases, the peak hour prices were close to $1,800. And I guess there could be debates whether it is good enough or too poor of an approximation to capture the real-time dynamics. And again, keep in mind, we are comparing this on-cap DB, what will be the natural calculated value, versus a price that is basically just determined on the existing bidding structure. That is the hard cap for most of the resources, including the storage resources. If we were to change the bidding structure, the bid stack would be different. Potentially, the real-time prices would be different. Just keep that in mind. The next two slides are effectively the same comparison that we have for other two critical days. If we can just glance through the next one, please. This is August 16, and as you can see, when you subset the dates analyzed based on the dates that were triggered for the 831, we're getting about the right dates of the critical conditions, tight supply, like the summer conditions, or even for the winter conditions that we just experienced in the 2024. And in this case, for August 2023, the story is not that different. You can see that, yes, the real-time MIBP reaches the $2,000 for the peak hours. The FMM at some point reached that high value as well, while the IFM or the on-cap DB come slightly lower than that. Next slide, please. And this is January 14, 2024, just this last cold snap that we have. And this is interesting because, yes, prices in the Northwest, specifically in Mid-C and in the Northwest in general, were relatively higher given the tight supply conditions they were experiencing. These are not the conditions that were experienced in California area or in the Southwest in general. As you can see, when you compare those, it's not surprising to see that the FMM prices that are specific to the CAISO or the EIM in general were quite low in comparison to either the on-cap depth or the real-time maximum import bid price. And just because of that disconnect, that the maximum import bid price is still relying on these high conditions reflected in high prices in the Northwest that may set that price. In that case, the real-time prices came relatively modest, not spiking as much as reaching the criticality of the $1,000 prices.
Right, but you're not looking at the prices in the Northwest, Guillermo. So looking at the SMEC is not relevant because that's the distributed load bus for the entire Western imbalance market, but it's the Pacific Northwest that's relevant. And they were at $1,000 virtually all day.
That's right, Scott. And we did see the price separation happen very steeply. Prices in the Northwest, specifically to the Pacific Northwest, were in the range of 1,000 or even higher. And the whole Southwest and CAISO were relatively low. And that brings a good point of the reference of using the SMEC or something different for a proxy in this comparison.
You know, just as an aside, this makes me wonder. We take the index block prices and we use the shape of the CAISO SMEC, I think, to sort of shape it. And to the extent that the price shape looks different in other parts of the West, it does make you wonder about whether we're shaping it wrong for different parts of the West.
Yeah, I think it's really touching on the point of regional conditions, right, rather than system-wide conditions. Can we move to the next slide, please? The second set of slides that you have here is a sample. Again, keep in mind, this is specific to one peak hour ending 19 and specific. Here you have color-coded the different type of technologies because that is the relevant part of the discussion here. This bid stack is only showing the higher end of the bid stack as we approach to the bid cap and a little bit on the left. It's not the exhaustive bid stack from zero. And this one is specific to the day ahead. And there is a clear difference when you compare the real time versus day ahead because of this inclusion of the virtual convergence bids that takes a good space on the right side of the distribution. We have, in these cases, this is specific again for September 2022, we have the virtuals basically taking the upper end of the bid stack anywhere between 1,000 and 2,000. There may be some resources there that fall very cleanly in the price range of $1,000. And this is a multicolor. You can see that there is a portion that is in bright blue that corresponds to the NGR. Effectively, these are storage resources. We also have a little bit of PDRs, that is the bright green. And we have the dark blue, in this case, that is also belonging to gas resources. When we move to the real time, you can see some interesting dynamic here. If we can move to the next one, please. In the real time, for the same trading date, the same hour. Now we take out of the picture the convergence bits. Everything is physical in this bid stack. And what we see is nothing out of the ordinary. We have, in first place, the reliability demand response resources that are at the top of the bid stack, at the 90–95% of the cap of the 2,000. And then we have this extended range of $1,000 bids, dominated by the dark blue, that is the gas resources, followed by the hydro resources in yellow, and to some extent for storage resources in this bright blue. If you look at a little bit on the left-hand side of the bid stack under $1,000, you can see that they start to come close also to the bid cap, right? And we have all these hydro resources and the storage resources crowding out that range anywhere between, I would say, $500 to basically $1,000. And under the current bidding structure of these days, that somehow is reflecting the dynamics that we have been discussing in this initiative, in which basically they are bidding up to the cap, that is the maximum they can, in order to manage their dispatches.
Guillermo, I may be missing something, but the horizontal axis here is into 120 gigawatts. And on the previous slide, it was on the order of 60-ish, 50 to 60. What footprint are we talking about here for this?
Yeah. So in the day ahead, it's only the day ahead market for the CAISO balancing area.
Oh, so this is the entire EIM footprint now?
Yeah, and for the real time is the whole EIM footprint.
Got it.
The next couple of slides is effectively the same comparison for other days. If we can just glance through the next, please, moderator. This is again August 2023. The picture is not that different. And then we also have the one for the real time that you can see. Actually, in this one, I think the storage resources is more heavily on the upper side of the bid stack. You see all this bright blue, anywhere between 500 all the way to the bid cap, dominated by storage resources. Next slide, please. This is now the January 2024, and as we indicated, this is the day ahead. It's only CAISO. We do have resources for storage and to some extent virtuals in the bid stack of $1,000. And I don't see that much of the hydro for these conditions. Obviously, this is the day ahead. It's not the whole EIM footprint. If we move to the next one, that is the last one for this second set, this is the real time where we have all the hydro from all the EIM footprint. And you can see that the hydro basically crowds out the upper end of the bid stack. That is the bright yellow that you have in there, complemented to some extent with the storage resources.
Guillermo, I have a question. Are these the bid prices that are reflected in the bids as these resources submitted to the market, or is this post-market power mitigation?
No, these are the bidding information before mitigation.
Okay.
So these are unmitigated bids?
Correct.
Okay.
I do see a hand, Ben. I think we're going to change the set of metrics. I don't know how you want to manage that.
Should we take a couple questions now?
Yeah, let's take, I see Michelle and Sybil and Dan. So this is, let's go ahead and take those before, rather than get too backed up.
Hey, Guillermo, this is
So,
Michelle from Energy Division. Just a quick question. So just to clarify, these are hour ending 19, which is 6 to 7 p.m., precisely the time we want people to be discharging. Is that correct?
Yes, this is hour ending 19, meaning from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. And this is the time when we expect that the storage resources are going to be discharged.
Okay. So, but if we switch to our new logic, the $2,000 bid, they would have cost justified bids at 2,000. So we might expect that they would, all the people that are sitting at 1,000 might sit at 2,000. Okay, you don't have to answer that question. That's my concern. Thank you.
I see your point, Michelle. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Sybil from PGP.
Hi, this is Sybil Gieselin from the Public Generating Pool. A couple of our members are EIM entities, and our larger pool of members represents a lot of Northwest Hydro entities. I just wanted to make a couple observations in this data here. I think earlier we heard folks posit that if the cap was raised, the entire stack of these resources would be bidding at $2,000 in all of these hours where the cap is higher. And what I see here in all of these charts where we're showing the bid stack is there's actually still quite a lot of resources and supply bidding below the cap, and also as evidenced by the market clearing price and the real-time price graph, you know, these resources were not needed. the very high end of the cap until the hours when they were appropriately required for the market, as evidenced by the market clearing price, which did not clear at the cap during all hours during any of these very stressed system condition days. So I'm struggling to see the data here representing this behavior that participants on the call have been raising as a concern, that somehow raising the cap and enabling resources to represent their cost across the day is going to remove the incentive to bid economically and have logical market behavior and market clearing prices. Thank you.
I mean, that's a good point, and I think someone else made it earlier that, you know, this is only the extreme tail of the supply curve, because, you know,
It's kind of deceiving
it
now.
starts at about 100,000 megawatts. And so, like, I don't even know if any of this cleared. I mean, this is a tough day to analyze because we've got completely different prices prevailing in California and the desert Southwest and what's up in the Pacific Northwest. So, you know, if we just looked at this bid curve as if it were one market, we'd probably have a market clearing price that's off the chart to the left, and you know, the resources that are high might be very, very small relative to and have no impact on the price. But of course, in the Pacific Northwest, it was high, and in California, it was low. So it's a complex picture that's not really represented here.
Yeah, and I think in terms of how you can turn this into, you know, interpreting the options that are on the table, that last chart showing the prices in the winter event really demonstrates that using the SMEC is really not a viable solution for getting at, you know, solving the root problem here. But I think there are other options on the table that will enable these resources to, as others have pointed out, as we align with CISA on this one, preserve their place in the bid stack through raising the cap appropriately, and in some cases that means to correspond with changing conditions between day ahead and real time, but still maintaining the appropriate price signals. That doesn't mean that you lose all competition in the market either. Thanks.
Hey, thanks, Sybil. Dan Williams is in queue.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, Dan Williams from the Energy Authority. Sybil said that very eloquently, and I'll try not to repeat what she said, and also agree very much with Scott that, you know, we have to be careful what we're looking at here as far as the SMEC versus, you know, looking at the EIM lapse, or even just looking at NPSP 15 prices when looking at the previous charts and maybe having a little better reference for what was going on at these times. But specifically to these days, these are very, very abnormal conditions of day-ahead market hitting intertie penalty prices because of congestion, not because of undersupply and feasibility from an energy perspective. I think the SMEC during a lot of these times was down sub $500, and yet Northwest prices were well above 1,000 and pegged above that for a substantial amount of time. The takeaway here, I guess, is exactly what Sybil said, of we're trying to create headroom for competition to allow these resources in their specific areas where they're serving load, which is what they're doing in EIM, to appropriately manage their fuel and meet their needs without having to pull their resources out of the market, without having to do, you know, sort of out-of-market things, or impact their flexibility in a way that could cause them to fail the resource efficiency test, which then brings, you know, XYZ other problems into the market as well. So the flexibility should be there. And then when we flip around and look at a period where the load dynamics that were happening in the Northwest during this period are instead happening in the desert Southwest or in California, at those points, the resources from the Northwest are generally constrained down because of a lack of transfer capacity from the Northwest into California. And, you're generally not seeing them setting the price, setting the SMEC at that point. And they have limited ability to, to influence things going from north to south anyway, especially through EIM. So I feel like some of the fears are specifically relates to hydro, but agree with what Don Trethewey said and Chris Devon as it applies to storage as well, that the fears are overblown. We have a ton of transparency in these markets, and we just have a different market condition than we do at times when maybe some of these concerns were developed and existed more rightly. I'll leave it there. You can keep going with the meeting.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, Sylvie, I'm sorry, Guillermo?
Okay, can we move to the next slide, please? The next set of metrics is a simple comparison. We do some tracking of the prices in the system, comparison between IFM and real time, just to see how good of a proxy the IFM or something else would be relative to the prices realized in the real time. And we also have some metrics about the default energy bids, how they came along relative to the cap that we have in place. If we can move to the next slide, please. Now, there are several matrices that we put in place here to capture basically all the days where we have the 831 triggering at any point on time. It's just the whole day that we are showing up here. And these first ones are very straight. It's just a plain comparison of real-time price, specifically the FMM price relative to the IFM price, just to see how well the IFM prices would be tracking to the real time. And I would say you are going to see a variation of results and depending on the day, depending on the conditions. And keep in mind, this is the
thing
SMEC.
is, you're again looking at the SMEC, and weren't these June days in 2021 when it was like 170 degrees in Portland, and the high prices were up there? I mean, I didn't have time just getting these slides today, but maybe some of the people from the Pacific Northwest, I'm not sure this is representative. All this stuff of looking at the SMEC doesn't really tell us, what was going on in the different regions.
Right. Yeah, I understand, Scott, and I think that is potentially one of the items that has to be exhausted in the discussion, right? Because we can go as granular as the 23 balancing areas, and congestion is going to be a factor, not only internal congestion to the system, but even congestion creating price separation between balancing areas. And if we are looking for a simple solution in the short term, how we can characterize the congestion properly for something that has to work across the 23 balancing areas. I think the SMEC was a plain reference just to see supply balance conditions, but you are right. Congestion in some cases could be a material factor to consider in this assessment.
Right. I mean, we shouldn't say that there was no high prices in RTPD because, we're not looking at the actual prices. We're looking at the distributed load reference bus price.
Yeah, we're comparing the same. We're comparing the SMECs across markets. Yeah, that's the point. And it's capturing more of the balance condition rather than congestion conditions.
No, it's not the load balance in the Pacific Northwest. It's, the weighted average load balance over the entire Western EIM.
Yeah, understood. Next slide, please. And there are three matrices in total here. This one covers the 2022 summer conditions. And in this case, you can see that there are some cases where both the prices in real time and day ahead go above the cap of the $1,000. And there are others like in September of 2022 where the prices were pretty mild relative to the bid cap. Next slide, please. And this will capture also the winter of 2024, where you can see that the prices were basically flat under $500.
But again,
Next
as we
slide.
said, that's only the SMEC. It's not in the Pacific Northwest. So we can't draw any conclusions about this.
Correct. Next slide, please. And this is a slightly different comparison. And this is comparing the average SMEC of the real-time market relative to the trigger of the maximum import bid price that was utilized from the real-time. The one in red is the maximum import bid price cap to the 2000. And this is going basically through the same set of data we discussed before. And similar story. In this case, you can see that depending on the day, depending on the condition, you can get different relationship between these two variables. Next slide, please.
There is a consistent red above blue from these, but again, I think location, it's hard to interpret, but this is kind of saying that.
Yeah, I think the location knows everything. It isn't, we've got to have on days where it's really, really hot in the Pacific Northwest, which I think, as I recall, that's what was going on in June back in 2021.
Yeah, and that's
really
what's
meaningful.
driving. Yeah, that's what's driving the red, because that's a trading hub.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we are open to do more granular comparison if that is useful for this discussion. So there are many permutations we can play in terms of the regional nature of the prices.
Note though that the solutions that we're looking at right now are not tailored regionally. So a summer solution is necessarily going to be broad and based on what we're looking at here, as opposed to tailored to specific areas.
We gotta look at this and compare it to like prices in the Pacific Northwest and other regions, because it's completely useless to have something that's tied to the SMEC if it's going to be $500 when the price is, far higher than that in the region that matters. I mean, I think this shows that anything based on the SMEC is useless.
I think it also shows that a resource-specific solution is, or at least a more narrowly targeted solution, is definitely optimal. We need to look more granularly at how to tailor the prices to these resources. For summer, though, we are limited, so we have to consider how well or not well a single solution will apply across the EIM.
Remind me, the MIBP is it taking the higher of the two big trading hubs? So if we have a circumstance where, say, the Desert Southwest is cheap, but the Pacific Northwest is super expensive, that's basically that Pacific Northwest hub is what's setting this then. And I do wonder if there's maybe some way of refining these ideas to sort of capture some of the regional, very blunt, at least regional variation in conditions. Because we've thought about this index as sort of where imports into California are coming from, which could be both of those places. But if we think of them as local costs serving those local areas, it's a different kind of thought exercise.
Right. Yeah, and you're right. We take the maximum of either just to capture the essence of the north and the south. And I think that could open up the door for a broader discussion that I would believe would be more for the longer term, because then in what type of resources do you subject the condition internal to CAISO, right? The imports are very strict because they are either in one side or the other, but what about internal resources?
Right.
Okay, next slide, please.
We do have, Michelle's got a question if we could, before going on to this. Stacy, could you invite Michelle to ask a question or make a comment?
This is Michelle from the CPUC Energy Division. I think this illustrates my issue with the maximum import bid price. So as you know, it's based on the bilateral indices, and those are very thinly traded. Again, for September 6th, the day that we keep on talking about, there were 3 25 megawatt transactions. And as a result of those 3 25 megawatt transactions that we then shaped, we raised our maximum import bid price, which then raised our cap to $2,000. So I just want to be clear that there's price separation between our 45,000 or 50,000 market and the 3 transactions that we're using for the maximum import bid price. And this is some of the problem. In addition, we have the separate issue that we don't think the hourly shaping factor is calculated correctly, which we put in. But these are the issues. I mean, these are administratively determined. These are not, thickly traded indices. And I know people disagree with me, but I have some other issues, but I won't raise them here. But I think that's why you see the price separation. And you particularly see this price separation on stress system days. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. Go ahead, Guillermo.
Yeah, can we move to the next slide, please? This last part is a simple distribution of the depths that we have specific to the hydro, how they were distributed for this specific set of data we are analyzing. It's just a box plot that you have here. And there is a dotted line at the top of each of the panels just to put the relative reference of the cap of the $1,000. And you can see in some cases the depths are pretty compacted in a small range of the distribution. There are other days like in July of 2021 where there is a wider range of the depth, but in this specific set of days that we are showing, they are all below the bid cap and not even close to the bid cap.
Right, but again, we have to think about congestion, Guillermo. I think these were days where the Pacific Northwest was constrained down relative to California. So the problem wasn't in the Pacific Northwest. I think there's problems getting power out of the Pacific Northwest on these days. And that's why their prices would be low, and they should be low. The problem was in CAISO.
Yeah, you're right. So I don't think we are arguing that. I think the reference is that if we were exploring to utilize as a short-term solution to rely on somehow the uncapping the depth, what do you get out of that, right? Even for these critical days where we have in discussion.
Yeah, it doesn't help here, but when you start looking at 23, 24, it becomes more meaningful.
Jim, are you saying that you think that the uncapped hydro debs would have been over 1,000 then?
Well, I cheated and went ahead in the slides, so.
Okay. Okay. Well, I was going to say that for hydro with any significant amount of pondage, you're going to get a lot less volatility for water values or value of a state of charge than you will for 4-hour batteries. So,
I think so.
It wouldn't surprise me if the hydro debs were in the hundreds, but not they won't leap up day by day unless you've got some nearly run a river with just a very small amount of pondage, which is of course not the situation in the Northwest.
Yeah,
but,
I didn't know if I
since
wanted to
you've
wait.
peaked.
I think we'll see that actually the hydro debs go high because they're tied to the day ahead market prices, and that's if we get to the next page, I think we'll see that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, can we move to the next one? I think you can see that there are days where you get more interesting patterns. And this is the cases of the 2022, the summer of the 2022, including the day of September 6th. And now we also have the storage. And this is the time when we already have depth for storage resources. And that is the reason now you see 2 sets. The one in blue is for the hydro, and the one in red is for the storage resources. And we also have the relative cap of the $1,000 dotted line. And here you have a more mixed outcome of the depths. There are days in which you do have depths that are naturally resulting in values above 1,000. And that is mainly for the hydro. For the storage resources, there are other days, specifically and interesting enough, in the September 6th, where you can see that there are some outliers that are above the $1,000 cap. And I think one thing you can take out of this is that it's not for granted that for every single condition where the 831 may trigger, you have the depth capturing the system-wide condition, right? And I think Scott has very clearly emphasized the regional nature of conditions that in some cases is the Southwest, in some cases is going to be the Northwest. But what you have here is the exploration of what would that mean if we're going to take on these potential solutions in the short term of potentially just relying on the on-cap depth. The next one covers the last set of days, and I believe that is for 2023 and 2024. Can we move to the next slide, please? Yeah, and here you have the summer of 2023 and a couple of days of the cold snap in 2024. And for the 2024, you can see that indeed we have hydro depths to some extent above the bid cap. You have the 13, 14, 15, and 16, all of them exceeding the $1,000 cap for some of the depths. All the storage resources, not surprisingly, are mainly under the $1,000 because, again, it was not a CAISO condition in which the majority of the storage resources would be reflecting that pricing dynamic.
And it does.
So Guillermo, can I ask you about the calculation of the hydro dam? So, you know, a vanilla hydro dam with a significant amount of pondage, you know, I'm talking about not necessarily over seasonal like you can get in BC, but still this many days of storage. Why would the value of water vary so much day to day? For example, compare the 16th and the 17th. Are these basically reservoirs with very little pondage, essentially almost run of river, and you have a few hours of water behind them?
I think those constraints are really factoring into Deb is the answer.
No, this is actually, sorry, this is actually simpler, Ben. These depths are still based on bilateral prices, on the prices that we have for the main hubs. And if the prices move, the depth is going
so
to
this
move.
is not a calculation of value of value of water.
Yeah, this is an index that doesn't have its specific flow constraints and sort of stuff in there. So.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's other.
I mean,
it's
does
other
illustrate
stuff that's setting the prices.
Yeah, it does illustrate your point, though, that I'm not sure, you know, it makes sense for you know, to the extent that Deb is trying to capture some notion of the value of water. I'm not not sure it makes sense that it would be moving around this much from day to day. And the spirit of it was to sort of capture some combination of long run and short run opportunity costs. But I think it's kind of more in the spirit now of whatever's higher will set the Deb, rather than kind of, you know, and so I'm not sure from a pure value of water standpoint, taking the higher makes sense if you don't really have scarcity from running it full out over one day. Why
earlier cold spell, you don't want to drain all your water in the first day.
Yeah, no, clearly there were a lot of people. There was a lot of hydro.
Once the cold spell's over on the 17th, of course, yeah, the value goes down.
Right, but if you had a lot of water in the pond, and you knew that the cold snap wasn't going to last forever, right. Then I'm not sure what the right answer is. But we were clearly seeing, you know, those bids way up well, again, relative to a very large bid stack that we're not seeing information for, but there was a lot of hydro bids up around 1,000 in this period. So they did feel like they wanted to save their water for something. That's for sure.
Where the range on the boxes for the hydro are the range of the debs, right? So some people had low debs and some people had high debs.
And I imagine that's across the entire footprint again. So some of the low end might be in California and the high end's in the Northwest.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or it could be people with lots of pondage versus not. I don't know, whatever.
Well, does that factor into the formula though?
This is a question that I posed to stakeholders, which is if we're seeing something like this, does it make sense to have a hydro resource above $1,000 in the Pacific Northwest informing the bid cap for storage resources, say on January 13th? But I've also heard we've seen and heard from stakeholders that, you know, even raising the cap doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to bid competitively, but it is a question that I wanted feedback on.
Well, I think there's a couple things here. There's sort of like the hydro and batteries are different. And so the concepts of what the right DEB would be are going to be different. And then there's this huge regional difference, I think, in terms of the issues kind of that we're facing, where there's kind of a shepherding of the hydro resources in the Northwest. It's kind of almost a distinct set of reliability issues from how we manage batteries day to day in California.
Exactly. So the stakeholder proposals today say the higher or the highest of the max import bid price and cost verified value, which would allow a hydro resource to inform the bid cap for these storage resources if they submitted that bid.
I guess back to the earlier discussion too, where when we calculating these hydro DEBs, we're not really considering the physical capabilities of the plants in the sense of their, you know, how much reservoir capacity they have and so forth.
And what their flow restrictions, you know, et cetera, are minimum flows.
So while their bids are definitely going to consider that.
Yeah,
no, that is not an input to the calculation. It's simply based on this bilateral. There is a long-term, short-term, and a gas component. Right. I have to say, by the time they do the registration, they have to show the level of storage, that they meet the criteria and so on. But this is just for the registration process to ensure that they can indeed hold for using a hydro DEB. But after that, the calculation is basically on the indices.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's really what we have for this. And I understand, and I really understand the complexities that looking at this mechanism is not always the right way, because we have regional conditions that may be very dynamic. I would just put this back to the track that we have been discussing earlier, that for the short term, we are trying to look for a simple solution that can be implemented, right? And I think there are some trade-offs that come in play when we are making this type of assessment. If there is any other type of meaningful analysis that you believe is useful for moving this discussion forward, we are happy to entertain that.
Well, certainly is something a little finer grained in terms of rather than the SMEC, something that reflected regional prices. It sounds like that would be a logical next thing to check as well, and would be informative. Scott or Jim, if there are other suggestions you might have.
I think regional granularity isn't implementable by this summer. Sylvia can.
No.
I mean, it's sort of the spirit of the higher of kind of metrics is that, you know, do you want to err on the side of worried about reliability and giving more ability to self-manage this kind of resource limits, or do you want to err on the side of trying to deal with market power concerns? And so if you're more worried about the market power, and then you're going to try to, I think, have to focus more on the regional differences to try to calibrate your caps to some more accurate measure of what the local true costs are. You know, I think in addition to all the other issues we've talked about, the market power concerns are very regionally different as well, because California having much less vertical integration is going to be a very different set of kind of incentives than most of the rest of the EIM as well.
Dan Williams is on the line, so Stacy, you can invite Dan to say something.
Last quick comment, Dan Williams from the Energy Authority. One is just say, you know, Guillermo's team, Katie, I do believe that this was helpful analysis and a lot of good data. The extrapolation from there was just sort of what conclusions we draw from it. So I do appreciate all the effort that went into putting this together for us to look at and have something to sort of jump off from with ideas. But specific to Sylvie's question of, you know, is there harm in hydro being the reason that the DEB moves higher and that changing things for resources inside California? I don't think that there is, because there are different conditions happening when that's happening. When hydro in the Northwest needs this flexibility within EIM, it's because supply conditions are very tight in the Northwest, and they're trying to manage their water availability and deal with those high prices that are coming, because the rest of the region is not necessary, the rest of the EIM footprint, the rest of the CAISO is not in an undersupply condition. It's simply the constraint of being able to move power from south to north that's driving the price separation, the high prices that then feedback loop into the bilateral markets, drive the index prices higher, and we're off into these conditions that are showing up on the chart here. If the reverse is happening and there's sort of region-wide high prices and the caps are lifted and that applies to hydro, and hydro needs those high prices to manage itself, then there's no problem, because the entire West is in a high price condition, and yes, then storage needs that higher price as well. And in the third condition, if it's just high price conditions inside California, hydro would not be the ones that are driving the price higher anyway. It's going to be the shortages within California that storage is managing itself around, that's needing this headroom to appropriately manage the availability of the resource. So I think the specific dynamics of the system, the transfer constraints, prevent there from being a problem of hydro causing too much headroom that somehow allows storage to take advantage of a market opportunity, if you even believe that that's a thing. And I don't, because I think there's a competitive forces at play there. But that was just a kind of answer to what you had posed, Sylvia. I don't know if that sparks any thoughts for the MSC.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that, because I hadn't thought of it, or I hadn't framed it as, does this cause harm, or is this the intent of what stakeholders had recommended? And I appreciate the explanation for why this makes sense.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, so this concludes the presentation, and I guess I'll check to see whether there's anything more that anybody wants to say. Once again, I see some discussion in the chat, and I'd rather not respond to that, just because I really want to encourage people to speak up. Things in the chat will often get overlooked, and that's I don't want to encourage that possibility. So Michael, if you want to get in queue that and say something, that'd be great. Yes, so he is in queue. So Stacy, can you open up Michael's line?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, you just speak up just a little bit. You're pretty soft.
Sure. Thanks, Ben, for taking my question. I was just curious, if this MIBP approach is an all or nothing, for 24 hours of the day, and for example, the September 6th event, would if you applied it to the 4 hours leading up to the hour when the real-time MIBP was over 1,000, would that address the issue of the early discharge?
Right, I think several of us think it's important to raise the prices early in the day, but not necessarily to raise them during the net load peak. But I think Sylvie said that, that can't be done for this summer. So that's my understanding. Correct me, Sylvie.
Correct.
That's what I heard too.
We cannot be selective about which hours.
You can be, yeah, in other words, you have to apply the same cap to all hours, or you can do that if you wanted to, or yeah, but it can be selected to be relatively high or relatively low, but it has to be the same across all the hours.
The bid cap itself is applied hourly, which is why we can apply a max import bid price that changes hourly. But in order for the bid cap logic that stakeholders describe to activate hourly, requires something conditional or a different calculation, which is a different question than having an hourly cap.
It just kind of seems a little unexpected that you could have a real-time MIBP for 4 hours during the peak, but the cap you're either 24 hours or nothing.
Yeah, something that we thought about internally was having some sort of a new calculation, like a binary calculation that would be 0 for all the hours we didn't want the bid cap logic to apply for, 1 for the hours that we do want the bid cap logic to apply for, and that would activate that bid cap logic only in the hours that we wanted to. But it's a new calculation. It's not a type of logic we do today. It would be very high risk, and we also still don't have sufficient information on what hours necessarily that would be applied to, and if we should do it for 4 hours or a different cycling time. So it was assessed to be too complex for summer.
It sounds like you're saying it's not just a Siemens problem, but it's there's still some more detailed issues that would have to be discussed in terms of choosing the hours, and that time isn't sufficient to go through those and implement it. But there's
figure out the hours. That isn't rocket science. That shouldn't be the deciding thing. But I can see the implementation.
Okay. No reason to think though that for 2025, there's nothing in principle that prevents us in the longer term. It's just not a solution this summer. Is that right?
Okay. Correct. We propose to stakeholders that we continue this discussion if necessary. We can think about enhancements for 2025, and we did commit to continuing this discussion for more robust changes to the reference level change request process and beyond.
Yeah, given what I think I heard Don Trethway say, that there may be some frustration that some of these issues were raised. They felt that some of these issues were raised before, and that the discussion didn't occur on a timely basis. So that might be a reason to continue discussions through 2024, so that it's we don't find ourselves in the same position again next year, if I understand what he was saying. But okay, so let me just see. Anybody else on the phone lines?
Well, Ben, just to
You want-
follow up on what you were, can I just follow up on what you just said? Yeah, which
Sure.
we're all just channeling different interpretations of what Don said. But I think the bigger point, which is a consistent CAISO market issue, is we've been talking about what can be done under sort of ad hoc methods to deal with a near-term situation. And yeah, a lot of times we end up so focused on that we kind of ignore the solving the underlying problems. And so I do think we need to think in terms of two tracks here, like keep moving towards a more sustainable, acceptable, longer term solution, as well as whatever we can do in the short term. And a lot of times we end up sort of never getting to that long term.
Don is on the phone line, so we no longer need to channel him. We can hear from the source.
Yeah, this is Don. I'll give an amen to Jim's last comment. If we can scroll a few slides before, I want to get some clarification from Sylvie, because I thought after her latest comments that something that was actually one of the proposals is now supposedly not implementable. So if we could just scroll forward to like the pictures where Guillermo had the further. Go ahead. One more, a few more.
Get back to Sylvie's slide.
There we go. This one right here. This one's perfect. So, you know, what I was understanding, proposal 1, option C, was that you would take the max of the highest uncapped DEB or the real-time maximum import bid price. So you'd have basically a bid cap that goes at $1,500. Then in about hour ending 17, it goes up to 2,000, stays there for 4 hours, and then comes back down to 1,500. And that was sort of what CISA believed was sort of a good intermediate short-term approach to address the concerns that others have expressed that, oh my God, we're going to let people bid at $2,000 every single day and every hour when they may not need to bid that high or it's not appropriate. And so that's whenever I say, you know, let's get it to the right spot, at least let them bid up to a certain point. They can still bid lower than that, but at least then we've got these short-term resources with a cap that looks like 1,500 for most of the day, going up and then back down. And like I said, the one reason you would need the maximum import bid price in there is in the event that you have $2,000 prices going, or the maximum import going beyond, 4 hours. So, so is that not implementable, Sylvie?
Comments were not about implementability. It was more about not having sufficient clarity from stakeholders. Your recommendation was to allow resources to bid up to the higher of the max import bid price and the highest cost verified bid. And today the tariff defines cost verified bid as a bid that has been adjusted through the reference level change request process. So I just wanted to get that clarity from stakeholders as to whether or not the highest cost verified, the cap could be set by a quote unquote highest cost verified bid as one that is bidding up to $1,000 either via the uncapped DEB or this bid cap logic, but not through the reference level change request.
All right, well then let me try another. Then I'll ask for clarity. Can CAISO implement the logic for the bid cap on an hourly basis to be the higher of the highest uncapped DEB and the maximum import bid price?
That's what we described yesterday as being on the table, yes.
So you can have a different bid cap for hours during the day. It's not always going to be one. So you have the ability to do that, which I think goes a long way to addressing some of the concerns expressed that people are going to bid to have the ability to bid to 2,000 and assuming everybody's uncompetitive. This actually is a nice middle ground that at least, if your concerns are about uncompetitive behavior, which I don't think we're going to observe, it's at 1,500, not 2,000 like everyone assumed.
This is when I was asking about this earlier, this was exactly what I was trying to get clarification on too, because I thought the answer when I asked about it earlier was that in a picture like this, we're going to take the highest hour of the highest MIBP and just use that all the time. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but I thought that's what the answer I got was, in which case, instead of being green line and then yellow when yellow is above green, it would just be 2000 basically in this example all the time. But maybe I just misunderstood the answer. Because it seems like you could have. Go ahead.
I think we failed to coalesce around something yesterday, but what I'm hearing from today's discussion is that it's one strong contender, as Don has just pointed out, is using the higher of the max import bid price hourly and the highest cost verified bid. The other ones are still proposals that we're looking for feedback from stakeholders on, but we haven't heard strong alignment over one or another.
Well, but Silly, I actually asked for clarification. Can it be the highest uncapped DEB?
That's what a cost verified bid would look like. So if a resource submits a bid up to the value of their uncapped DEB, which is above $1,000, our system will consider that to be a cost verified bid, and that will inform the logic of non-resource specific imports as well as any resource specific bids that we apply this logic to.
So then if a storage or a hydro resource whose DEB, as the data that Guillermo showed, sometimes goes above the 1,000 far more often than a storage one. If we get one hydro bid in the entire EIM footprint, we would be able to observe this curve that goes from 1,500 then up to 2,000, then down to 1,500. As the caps.
Yeah, so I believe so. I'll need to double check with the technology people. But my understanding is that if that's the logic that applies to non-resource specific RA, it can be copied to the resource specific resources.
But then would it be extended just to hydro and batteries, or would everybody be able to bid up to this new level?
We did an analysis based on the technology change required to target this change, not to all resources, but to resources that have that use the hydro DEB option, the storage DEB option, or a negotiated DEB.
Okay, good. So we don't have some of the concerns I thought Michelle was expressing, that it would automatically trigger it for everybody. This would only go up for these people, for the storage resources. That sounds promising.
That's correct. I feel like I should note that our ability to target the bidding logic added a significant amount of complexity and risk. So if we dedicate ourselves to this solution as opposed to just removing the bid cap, there is a higher probability that we miss the August 1st implementation deadline.
But both options involve removing the bid cap, right? So there is kind of a nested solution here, in the sense that you can remove you can remove the bid cap on the DEBs, which would be necessary for both, and then you could sort of look at the higher of, and at least if you miss the implementation target of maybe that second part. I know software doesn't really work that way, but if you see what I'm saying, you're adding a little complexity by trying to incorporate the kind of higher of aspect of it. But
it's actually significant. Like when we do the assessment, we do it, like there's a number of metrics that we look at, and it basically doubles or more the complexity of the overall project, going from just removing the bid cap to applying a narrow bid cap solution. Sorry, going from just removing the DEB cap to going, adding a narrow bid cap solution.
Right. And the uncapped DEB is the thing that would be level over the day and allow the storage to offer high in the off-peak hours. And I think allowing people to offer even higher in the net load peak hours is not what Michelle and others were talking about. It was thinking maybe they should be offering lower. So, you know, the thought was that that's when they should be dispatched, is during the net load peak hours. So why do we need to raise the DEB for them even higher in those hours if it makes it more complicated? Then maybe we can't get it done.
Yeah, but then that's what brought me back to like this earlier notion of the shape in the Northwest may look really different than this. And so there, the MIBP shaped to a local kind of price shape might actually
Right, but the DEB doesn't use the shape at all. The highest DEB is the flat line.
Yeah, right. But I guess your logic was, okay, if we're taking the higher of, well, the higher of is actually too late in a sense, that then we're allowing higher bids after we really wanted the higher bids. But that is all kind of the fact coming from the fact that we're shaping it to a California price shape. And I'm now wondering if January in the Northwest, if that shape, maybe the high price hours are between 6 and 9 a.m. Because of various hydro constraints and heating load and that sort of thing, in which case I'm not sure. I mean, we don't use it, we don't shape that way anyways, but maybe we should, and that might change the logic of whether the green is higher than the yellow when we really want it to be. I guess for batteries, it's more of a California problem anyways. And I guess the other thought there, I hear what you're saying about that. There is an advantage too of allowing prices to be higher during those true peak hours in terms of giving an incentive to shepherd the energy for those hours. Now, maybe you don't necessarily need to have the higher bid caps for the storage resources specifically to allow the highest prices to be set in those hours, since there's going to be other resources that don't have those limits anyways.
I would just make 2 points. One of the reasons why we proposed that was an implementation consideration, in that calculation is already being performed for the non-resource specific RA imports. So we're trying to just mimic that calculation. And then it does address the concern that if that maximum import bid price extends beyond 4 hours, that you may need some flexibility in there. But I'm with you. There is not going to be a storage resource that is not going, because they're going to get a day ahead schedule in that time frame. They're going to honor that day ahead schedule. They're not going to look to buy it back at $2,000 prices. So it's only to the extent that it does only benefit it provides, including the maximum import bid price in this, is what he thought was an implication simplification, as well as addressing that narrow issue where if this lasted for 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, that you may need to have some additional flexibility.
But okay, now I'm confused, because I think what people have been saying is, so the alternatives here that we were talking about was green line only or green line yellow higher of. And it sounded like green line only was going to be much easier implementation than green line yellow higher of. And it sounds like,
and that's feedback we've just gotten.
Oh, okay. So, right. Okay. Because yeah, it sounds like it's the yellow part that's going to be the complication here. And
but
it sounds like
is
that's
that
lower priority for you.
The highest uncapped DEB here is the hydro DEB, right? And is it really the higher of the DEB for everybody? Or is there still going to be, there's still going to be, this is going to be the price cap, but there would still be mitigation based on the resource specific bid, right? The resource specific
Correct.
bid.
And I want to be clear that it would be the highest cost verified bid. So if the highest uncapped DEB goes up to 1,500, but that resource doesn't bid up to 1,500, it's not
Right.
going to set the cap at 1,500.
Right. But this is
Scott's
the
question,
cap,
any-
and then there'd still be mitigation, so resources based on their individual DEBs might get mitigated lower. But still, that seems like a good start for this summer.
It's 10 minutes past time, but we do have 3 people on the lines. I would ask Don, Adam, and Chris if you can be quite concise. Um, uh, and so we can go ahead and take, yeah, go ahead and open up. I see Don is very concise. He's just gotten off.
We were just hearing from him. So, yeah.
Right. Adam?
Yep. Hi, good afternoon. This is Adam Swadley from the Department of Market Monitoring. My question is brief. I really was just hoping to get a little bit more clarity on the potential to implement a different bid cap at different hours of the day, because I think I've heard different things throughout the meeting today. So I guess I just want to be clear. My understanding right now is that maybe it is technically possible, but that the concern is about reaching consensus on, the specific terms and hours that different bid caps would apply. Is that accurate, or did I miss something there?
No, I think you're picking up on a lack of language precision here. The easy lift, not easy, but the baseline implementation lift would be uncapping the DEB. It would require an additional layer of complexity to modify the bid cap logic to allow the cost verified bid to set the cap for hydro and storage resources. That would be another level, similar
Okay.
to yeah.
But just on a very basic level, the idea of having a different bid cap in a certain set of hours, is that something that, is technically feasible by this summer, where the real barrier is just, reaching the terms of which hours it would apply? Or is it something that you're saying that the technical lift to do any version of a different bid cap for different hours, that would be infeasible by this summer?
The only version of having a different bid cap per hour that we can consider is the logic that currently applies to non-resource specific RA, which is the higher the highest cost verified bid and the max import bid price. And we wouldn't be able to alter that logic. So we would be able to turn that off in different hours or turn that on in different hours. We would have to accept it as is.
Okay. That I think answers the question. Thank you.
Thanks for the clarifying question, Adam. Chris? And I see Michelle's also there, and I think then we'll call it a day. Chris?
All right. Thanks, Chris Devin with Theragen again. Appreciate all the discussion today. I just wanted to comment a little bit more broadly on trying to get something done this summer, and CAISO really needing to step up on the leadership here. I think we keep hearing CAISO say that they want stakeholders to somehow give them the direction here, but we're basically taking off in the plane as we're building it going into the summer. And if CAISO doesn't pick a direction on this, we're not going to get anything done in time for implementation. So I just wanted to, really stress that this is extremely important. And I think there's going to be no general consensus among all the stakeholders. I think we've heard some pretty good consensus from MSC, from DMM and the storage community that something should be done. I think obviously it depends on what's going to need to be, implemented and implementable in time. And we might not have the perfect answer, but we can't let perfect be the enemy of the good. So just wanted to, chime in on that for all the CAISO leadership that's listening on the phone. I think CAISO really needs to step up and put out a strong proposal here very quickly. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. And Michelle, I'll let you have the last question or comment.
Okay, so I just want to again remind everyone that what we're doing here is we're tying this to the bilateral price. So I'm looking at the bilateral prices from September 6th. Mid-C had 59 transactions. The price was from 425 to 675. However, the Palo Verde had 3 transactions, price from 950 to 999, or actually maybe a little higher that, so close to 1,000. So we're allowing Northwest Hydro to use the Southwest DEB, literally three transactions that we then shape even to our market, even though there's price separation. So, I mean, and also, you know, just recall that the logic here is that the order 831 logic is you have to have cost verification above 1,000. The fiction that we have here is that tying our resources to 3 25 megawatt transactions is cost verification, right? And then we're going to change our entire market. And so I just want to remind, I mean, I get it that storage doesn't want to discharge, and I think there are other solutions. I would note that, you know, essentially what we're allowing people to do is to bid above the bid cap, basically to withhold so that they can be available later in the day. So and then during later in the day, they can bid at the cap, potentially making themselves not available. So I think we have to think long and hard, especially given that Palo Verde is so thinly traded. 3 transactions can run our market, and that almost is the definition of market power in my mind.
Thank you, Michelle. I think I appreciate you bringing that up, and also comparing it to the transactions in the Northwest. So I'll just ask if anything closing, Guillermo, Scott, or Jim.
Not from Scott.
Okay. Well,
for me. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks to all the stakeholders. Thanks especially to Sylvie, Guillermo, and Katie for all the material that stimulated such an important discussion. And we're going to be considering an opinion ourselves, and and indeed that's the case, we'll be having a meeting again in the very near future, and look forward to having you join us on a call. Okay, so I think Stacy, I think we can now close the call.
Okay, that concludes our conference. You may now disconnect.